Yes.
Good
Working
day,
on the
Richard.
camera. I'm gonna come
Yes.
in soon.
Okay. Okay. Farid, how are you, my brother?
I'm good. I'm good. We had a little sabbatical last week due for some unforeseen circumstances. So we have some time to make up for this week.
Yes, yes, we
How
do.
are
We
you doing?
do. I'm
How are you
okay.
doing? You good?
Yeah, man, I made it through. I mean, down south we didn't have it all that bad as what I heard probably impacted Tobago and the northeastern end of the island, Trinidad, and we just had a lot of rain. It was raining heavily at one time. Then it was a light shower, and then evening time it cleared up until sometime later on in the evening, and then that was it. I left home. It was kind of overcast but sunny in some areas. But when I got to Port of Spain, dark clouds.
Yeah.
So I hope it
I
eats.
live in I live in Tunapuna. We had practically nothing. Just
Oh,
small bits of drizzle. We've had more rain on days when we weren't on storm alert.
that's true, true, true. I said the same thing last night. Yeah.
Yeah. I had a few friends who called me in the middle of the night. Well, I usually work late,
Yeah.
and they were calling from abroad, and they was asking how things shaping up down there. I said
Yeah.
things are very normal here,
Yeah. Very normal.
very normal. I mean, I sat down literally waiting for some action.
Yes, yes. I too. I thought it would have been worse than that, but I guess like they say, God is at your knee, so it.
Well, somebody sent me a meme. They sent me one of those little Trinidad and Tobago ID cards, and they had a picture of Jesus on it.
Yeah, I saw that too.
Yeah. Well, I
Trinidad.
think around 11 o'clock last night, they had sent the meteorological office had said that the storm had more or less turned positions away
Yes,
from us. So
yes.
we were safe from about just before midnight last night.
Yeah, 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 yeah. It took a little upward northward drift. Yeah, it likes these storms like to pass through Trinidad and Tobago. They don't like to interfere with us too much anymore. Well, I was more worried
And
for Tobago.
yeah. Well, I called some of my friends in Tobago. They told me that there's lots of rain there, but nothing to be concerned about.
Right,
It's
right.
very rainy and very dark.
Good, 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 good. Well, I'm
So we
happy
get rain
that
on both sides.
yes, I'm happy that nothing too extreme didn't take place to have us in no kind of mess right now.
Yeah.
More than
Well,
we.
we seen enough trouble as is
Yeah,
politically and
yeah.
economically and everything. So God decided, you don't get them everything one time.
I tell you. Yeah. Yeah, but outside of that, so many things have been happening. We've had the elections of the internal elections of the UNC. We had that wrangling in the courts of the US with some of these big timers of the airport scandal. So much things are happening now, man. There's a big,
Well, the thing with it is, trying to be good, there's never a dull moment. We always
I
have
tell you.
some live issue.
Yeah.
I have friends who live up the Caribbean, and when I ask them what's happening up there, I say, what they tell me, I say, but that's not news. They tell me fishermen coming in with small hauls these days and boats trapped at sea, and I say, but that ain't news. We don't report them thing here.
Nah, man.
The politicians up there seem to be they have a calmer existence, and
Yeah.
they seem to be less at each other's throat.
Yeah, it's
They're
true.
under, they're under less scrutiny. There's less encroachment on each other's lives.
Yeah.
But
I
anyway, we have some issues to get into. I know
okay.
Richard is gonna jump in at some point.
Yes.
Um, we were discussing before in terms of what's topical now. I was looking at, of course, we have the ruling by the Privy Council in relation to John Henry Smith and the
Hmm.
Attorney General.
Yeah.
I was saying to a friend of mine recently that in Trinidad and Tobago, the issues are the same issues. Sometimes it's just the characters that change.
Yeah.
To reflect a bit.
Hmm.
Um, this issue that arise or that the issue that arose in relation to John Henry Smith.
Yeah.
Basically, to the listening public, there was the Piaco 1, 2, 3, and 4
Hmm.
issues that would have arisen on the backdrop of the UNC demitting office
Yeah.
in 1995. well, not 95, in 2001 December.
Mm-hmm.
So if we were to add some political foundation to where we are at this today, after the NAR had been blown out of office by the Patrick Manning administration in 1991,
Mm-hmm.
Manning would have called an early election in 1995, a year before the elections were due, because he had a majority issue to deal with.
Yeah.
Having called that election 1 year before, the UNC would have ascended into office in 1995, and they would have held that seat there and be the incumbent government until December 2001.
Yeah.
So this is where our story today begins. In 2001 December, the People's National Movement, having formed the government, they had put together the Anti-Corruption Investigation Bureau, which operated within the auspices of the Attorney General's office. Now, we need to bear in mind, to put context to where we are, the Attorney General of that PNM administration at that time, it would have been John Jeremy.
Right.
And
Yeah. Right.
if you remember Jeremy correctly, he would have been the Attorney General, and then there was an issue that the then opposition leader Basdev Pandey raised, that the Attorney General seems to be advising, and I'm saying seems to because I want to be correct when I speak. I don't want to be looking at any defamation suit on my side.
Yeah.
Basdev Pandey seemed to be insinuating that the Attorney General was inciting the DPP's office to prefer charges against persons not without any evidence. Whether that was indeed the position is a different story. But this was the background to where we were. The UNC, in its existence then, in its incarnation in 2001, would have embarked on the airport rebuilding and restructuring process, and known as the Piaco, and then what came out of that was the Piaco inquiry. It was being said that certain Northern Construction Limited and certain preferred financiers of the UNC got contracts to build that Piaco airport. And born out of that, there were kickbacks to politicians and kickbacks to different people. Those were the allegations raised by the PNM, and the Anti-Corruption Investigation Bureau began to investigate some of those transactions. In fact, what resulted out of the Piaco 1 to 4 was various persons being charged for corruption and fraud. We had a Prime Minister, Basdev Pandey, who he was charged with, after the Integrity Commission investigated him, and convicted to 2 years imprisonment plus a fine, under having failed or having offended or contravened the provisions of the Integrity in Public Life Act. And this would have been 1987. It would have been the 1987 Act.
Yeah.
So let's perhaps, we'll touch on that. And I know that at some point when Mr. Bage presents himself, we will get into the UNC internal elections. And
Yes.
then we'll get back to where we are. So we'll take a break with that UNC situation, the internal election. It shouldn't take up much time because Mr. Bage doesn't have much time with us this afternoon.
Right. Yeah. I hear you.
So, David, your memory would be better than mine in some ways. So you're free to correct me if I'm shifting in terms of the detail. Some of what I'm repeating here, I went and I did some research to make sure that I'm getting the points correct. I don't want to be contradicted that I'm saying things that didn't happen.
Yeah.
But basically where we were, and what we're discussing today is the Integrity in Public Life Act. I'm referring and making references to our political history and references to who was in government at the time, and making additional references to that decision by the Privy Council this week, because it does in some way resonate with the inquiry and the UNC administration in that time frame. The same time frame is 2001 to 2005. So this is where we are. The Integrity in Public Life Act, that was created under the PNM administration sometime initially, in let's say in the year 1987. It was the act that exists that really impacts on us now is that 1987 act, right? It would have had some pre-existence in a different way before 1987.
Yeah.
But to put context to where we are, in 1987, the Integrity in Public Life Act, that would have come into existence, and the purpose of the act was to act as an oversight piece of legislation, and it created a commission whose responsibility was to pay attention to public figures. So when you have parliamentarians, people in the House of Representatives and people in the Senate, and even anybody in high office, what they had to do was to declare their sources of income, declare their registered interests, and declare any investment that they may have in wherever the investments are. Now, the purpose of doing so is if it is we're flying up to the Caribbean for tea, and you hear that we own a mall in Miami. Suddenly people would say, but just the other day they were regular people walking through Labre. Now the signal they're sending and the language they're using is not language of people who came from nothing. It seems to be people who have a very, very strong financial foundation. And sometimes, in Trinidad, we talk that people to walk around and they have plenty gun talk. Gun talk simply mean you're talking bold and brave and you're feeling untouchable. So what the purpose, the trust and the purpose and the substance of the Integrity in Public Life Act is to really monitor the income levels, the assets, incomes, and liabilities of people in public office. So in case these people adapt or adopt a lifestyle that is outside of their income levels, then one can investigate how did they come about such wealth. Because it doesn't matter whether you're prime minister or leader of the opposition or what position you have. Your purpose really is to function in a certain capacity. I'm seeing Mr. Beige with us.
Yes, he's there with us now.
Maybe what we could do is, Brian, you want to put on your mic? What we could do, seeing that he's here, we could
Hi, Farid.
Yeah, we can
How
start.
are you doing? You're good? All is well? It's good to see you.
It's always good to see you, my good friend.
Yes.
And I believe I'm hearing a very familiar voice in that of Mr. Richard Norrie. If that is Richard I'm hearing, or is that the producer?
Yeah, that's the producer, David McIntyre.
Mr. McIntosh, right. Very familiar voice I'm hearing.
Right.
Nice to have you on the program.
What we could do is maybe we could engage Mr. Bates, because I was just laying the foundation for where we are going. We could engage him now. And Brian, how much time do you have with us? I know your time is precious and limited. So if it is, I know upfront, I'll know how to gauge how we're going to embrace you in terms of how much time we will be taking up.
Well, I could be here for about a little after 5.
Okay, great. So we're looking at basically, it's now 3:30, so we're looking at least half an hour.
45
possibly a little bit more.
45
Okay, great. Right. So this is where we are, Brian. We have to welcome you. This is the Power Drive 102. We wanted you here particularly given your capacity as legal officer for the United National Congress. Not just that, but you have some political experience, barring your legal post with the UNC. So we want to welcome you and welcome the input that you're going to make this afternoon. It's always good to get input from a young person, not an old politician sometimes. The old politician brings war stories to the table, but at least you'll bring something legal, reasonable, and something that we could work with.
Well, I thank you for still seeing me as a very young person.
Well, I always I gauge people based on those holding political office. When we compare people like ourselves to people in political office, we always young, because politicians hold on to the very end. I see Richard is with us. So Richard, I'm happy that you're here. So we would attack Mr. Bejan on both fronts.
Well, I was here all the time. I had to warm up the camera.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, I didn't know Richard have a 1960 camera where you had to warm it up.
No, it's a different type. It's a different type. It's very sensitive, you know.
Yeah. But it's so good to hear Mr. Nori. I've been used to speaking to Mr. Nori via the phone, but I
Yes,
call him
yes.
for 102 when he was in a different capacity along with former colleague, Mr. Skippy.
Yes, yes. You're one of our daily guys.
Yes, yes.
We always look forward to your contribution, Brian.
Well,
So I know
So,
that
so Brian,
Fareed
maybe we can
has
get right
some
into it.
questions.
Sure, sure.
The unofficial results, I know that there's an official result that is supposed to be released by the end of the week. But what we could say is that maybe we could put it this way: the preliminary result, which is hardly likely to change in terms of between now and Friday, is that the political leader Kamala Persad-Bissessar for the United National Congress has retained her position as political leader. She was challenged by Fuad Khan. The figures that I'm looking at is Mrs. Persad-Bissessar got 11,648 votes, whereas Mr. Khan, Fuad Khan, got 648 votes. Now, I don't want to be misquoting anything. I'm only taking these figures from the Trinidad newspaper, Tuesday, the 28th of June, 2022. So that is my source. You can correct me if I'm off target. What does that speak? What does it speak into our politics that we have an alternative government where the leadership is unchallenged?
Yes.
How do you interpret that? What is your interpretation of a result of that nature?
Well, first of all, Fareed, let me say again, good afternoon to you and your colleagues of Power 102. It's a very different way of speaking to you all on Power 102 and to the nation at large. Let me just say that the figure that is out, I think we are still awaiting the final figure. I think the elections committee, I am yet to see the final figure on it. But so I'm not going to say if that is the proper and true figure, because there was another figure as well. So until I'm satisfied with what is the final figure, what I will say is that the United National Congress on Sunday, their members came out and voted overwhelmingly for the star slate, which is led by Kamala Persad-Bissessar. The membership of the United National Congress has all faith in Kamala Persad-Bissessar to take us into the next general election. Mrs. Persad-Bissessar, as the political leader of the United National Congress, has made a lot of advancements in the United National Congress since becoming leader to 2010 to now. There have been a lot of changes in the party. The party has grown significantly. One second. I hope you're seeing me still. Right. But Freddie, you know the active legal life. Clients calling you, why you're doing this?
Yeah.
You know, is that the party has grown significantly in more ways than one. The party has branched out in so many ways, in that we have people in this party are willing to come forward and assist at all levels, at any level. Before, people used to think, well, the UNC, you could only be seen yourself if you're an MP or you're a councillor. The political leader has increased that by creating committees within the UNC, where persons who are the normal member of the party, let's just say yourself, Fareed, if you were ever a member of the UNC, and you had said, well, I want to help with legal issues. The leader has created committees where you will be coming in and give your expertise in there. So if there are bills that needs to be looked at, you would be part of that committee to say, well, look at Section 5, or I think this bill should go a different way, or the party should support it that way. And everybody was given some form of supporting and helping the party. And that is why the membership brought back Mrs. Persad-Bissessar as leader. Also, with the national executive has always been involved with what is happening with the party. As you can tell, the party has branched off from not only having our Monday night meetings, which, as you know, because of COVID, we had to go virtually. The national executive went even further. to create other avenues so the membership can hear the party. So we created what was called TNT Speak. So when we go into the constituencies, where the constituencies can hear issues and concerns, where you had constituents talking, where you had a taxi driver speaking at one of our TNT Speak meetings of what taxi drivers are facing, especially as you know, we just had another increase in gas. And that man came and said why it's so tough for him, why it is so hard for him. So the membership has been seeing what the party is doing. And when the internal election was called, their membership came out and voted overwhelmingly for Mrs. Prasad.
So what you're saying basically is that within the UNC, there's inclusiveness and persons are getting access and a voice, not only access, but a voice within the party.
My friend, politics is about inclusion. I'm sure Mr. Nori would agree with me, being a former alderman at the Sawa-Laventille Regional Corporation. Politics is inclusion. And when everyone is involved, everyone has a say in some way or the other, you know what happens there? You know, they say, the leader recognized me. The leader saw what I can do. And from this, persons have been able to give certain expertise. And sometimes the leader realized, well, again, Freud, I don't mean to use you as an example, but let's just say there's a bill to come to the parliament in the Senate. You have given some points in a bill. So you say, you know what, I'm going to let Farid speak on the Senate. And you become a temporary senator. And you will speak on the bill. I can tell you that before, I have spoken on some matters of some bills. And the leader saw it fit to put me into the Senate to speak on the bills. Because of the fact that she said, well, you know, you gave such good views on this bill. I would like you to represent the party as a temporary senator. Right. So you understand what I'm saying?
Brian, I'm following you clearly. Let me get a little controversial because that's the purpose of being a little incisive in terms of what we're doing here. We have this situation where Kamala Prasad Bisessa's detractors, her political detractors, the persons who are no longer involved in the party on a day-to-day basis, meaning functioning within the existing executive. And I'm calling names: Vasant Bharat, Fuad Khan, Ramona Ramdial, Glenn Ramadha Singh. These persons have challenged, or they attempted to challenge the leadership. In fact, in the wake of the election, Fuad Khan came out and said very eloquently and vociferously, he's saying that he's not conceding. He acknowledged that there is a result and he has lost, but he's not conceding because the elections weren't free and fair. The Kamala Prasad came out and said that she's extending an olive branch to anybody who wants to be a member. No one was kicked out of the party. Are you saying, in the spirit of inclusiveness, that there is room at the table for these persons to meet with the current executive, not necessarily in a manner to challenge or confront, but in a manner to sit at the table to build the UNC and to add value to what exists right now? Is it that the UNC is open to that, or that
my friend,
or those
persons refuse to claim that the elections was not free or fair? My friend, the United National Congress internal elections has always been free and fair, and free from fair. I have contested internal elections on 2 occasions where I have served on the national executive for 2 terms. I have been involved in so many internal elections of the United National Congress, even from since the days of Mr. Pandey. And the elections were always free and fair. But you see, you lost an election, but you don't want to concede. Well, sir, you lost. So you don't want to concede, as your business.
Well, he did concede that he lost. You know what he's saying is he's not conceding by way of making a concession to her in the sense that he's recognizing he lost on fair grounds. He's saying that yes, he has lost. The maths of the election speaks for itself, but he was contesting that the sanctity of the election process. Ramona Ramdial came out and said, now I be no brief for these individuals. Yeah, my capacity here, and Richard could support me in that regard, is purely inquisitorial. Ramona Ramdial said, and this is months ago, she said that our people with party cards ought to be allowed to vote because very many times, a lot of times, persons may have party cards, but they're not on the voters list. So therefore, persons who possess party cards they should be allowed to vote, and not just persons exclusively on the voters list. Now, after this election, the narrative and editorial coming out of her mouth changed. She said that all people with party cards were allowed to vote whose name weren't on the voters list. And as a result of allowing people with party cards to vote, they could, and whose name, and it wasn't cross-referenced to corroborate whether their name was on the voter list, they could have voted many constituencies at the same time, meaning that you pull up in from one station to the next. That's the way I interpret it.
Well,
so you can't win, Ms. Ramdial. What either way, she have an argument to argue both sides of it, and her position is the same. But Brian, here where I am, and this is what I'm trying to get you to answer me. Is the political leader, Kamla Prasad Bisesa, open to including these persons who contested positions against her, Ramdial, Fuad Khan, Glenn Ramada Singh, and anybody else, Harry Partap, all of them, and meet with them and operate under the same umbrella?
To answer your question very, very, very quick and fast, yes, the UNC is always open to anyone and everyone. Dr. Tim Gopi Singh did not contest the general elections of 2020. Dr. Tim Gopi Singh has always put himself forward. Dr. Tim Gopi Singh has served in the Senate temporarily during this period of time. Dr. Tim Gopi Singh has always been to every meeting we've had, right? Whether virtually or public. These said individuals has not even come to a meeting. They didn't even come and sit down, right?
Brian, I'm agreeing with you. I'm agreeing with you. I must say that Mr. Gopi Singh, and there are other members who would have been of that past dispensation who have not openly come out and criticized Ms. Bisesa in the open space, in the public space. They haven't tried to clean dirty linen outside there for everybody to watch and see. Even in defeat, Glenn Ramada Singh was indicating that he is free to serve the UNC in whatever capacity he's asked.
And I will tell you this. Dr. Glenn Ramada Singh and I are very good friends, and we are colleagues as well. He's also a practicing attorney at law. Many free legal clinics I do for the party, and I always invite Glenn. Glenn comes and gives his service, so he will do it again. And I want to make it clear and set the record straight that persons can only vote in the elections whose name is on the list. We've had persons, yes, who these things happen, and we will fix it. Okay, no one who had a party card but name was not on the list, there's no evidence of showing that where they voted, none at all, right? And they even say that I had a party card but my name not on the list, and you can't vote. No, you can't. And it's a proper procedure.
Let's look at the numbers. We had 100. Now they're bandying figures out there. They said the last internal election, you had 117,000 people eligible to vote in the UNC internal elections. This year, the figures they were quoting is there were 110,000 people. They're bandying that all you had is a 10% turnout. 10% turnout of the UNC eligible voting public turned up for this internal election. Do you think that that's a reflection of disillusionment with the United National Congress as a political alternative, or do you think that there are other factors that contributed to a 10% turnout in overall?
My good friend, that doesn't reflect at all badly on the party. We must understand on that day, we fought off what was called the elements, and the elements was heavy rainfall on that day. We had flooding within certain districts, so persons couldn't even come because of flooding. We had where persons had to get trucks and vehicles to try and get them out, right? We must understand that. And even with the elements, people braved the rainfall. We had an old lady who was seen to come in and vote, and that old lady came through the rain, Fareed. You know why? Because she is a proud UNC member and she came to vote, right? We had where young members were coming out facing that heavy rainfall, right? Because why? They were proud UNC members. We've had where there was no rainfall and the membership that came out to vote was of a higher level. So to say that
you're saying that the 10% voting turnout was limited to the chiefly responsible would have been the weather conditions on the day.
Yeah, we battled some serious weather on that day.
Brian, this is where we were in the last internal election. We had a 10% turnout there about 3 years ago.
I disagree. I don't think it was 10%. It was higher than that. It was much higher than that.
Well, I'm going based on what I read in the newsprint. The turnout through the years have not been good. Now, there's a school of thought that there is a disillusion. People are disillusioned with the UNC as an alternative government. Now, let's move past those voting figures and people turning out. Fuad Khan and Ramona Ramdial maintain a very, very strict position as it relates to the leadership of the UNC. They are saying that under Kamla Prasad Bisesa, the UNC will not return to power. The only person who said something different and said the alternative would have been Glenn Ramadhan Singh. Right? Now, my position is this. I am not assuming the position of Ramdial and Fuad Khan. My position is simply this. If we were to look at the empirical data, the UNC has lost under Kamla Prasad Bisesa a number of elections. Do you think that what the party may need now, or are you of the view that refreshing the leadership may have been more suitable to the UNC having a viable chance in the 2025 election and the local government election later this year?
No, there's no need for refreshing in leadership. Kamla Prasad Bisesa, let's remember 2015 general election, what we faced, where we had this extension of time, which the court ruled was wrong in the first place. But it was wrong, but they're not going to fix it. I mean, you're an attorney yourself. We're hearing such a statement like that. It baffles the mind. 2020, look what we went through. Irregularities in Tunapuna, irregularities in St. Joseph, which I was very much involved, right? Where you had ballot boxes not even being sealed. You had envelopes where you would have the spoiled ballots and it's not even sealed. And you had returning officers refusing to take note of those things. That, my friend, is irregularities. Further to that,
do you think those irregularities made the difference at the end of the day in terms of who
would have made it in St. Joseph especially, right? A lot of those irregularities would have made a difference. But further to that, my friend, right? These individuals who are saying these things about Kamla Prasad Bisesa, if Ms. Ramdial, who I'm a very good friend of, we are good friends, right? If Ms. Ramdial was still a member of Parliament for Kuva North, would she have been saying those same comments? Huh? Dr. Fuad Khan, a man I have great respect for, was still the MP for Sama Barataria. Would he have been making those same comments? No, they would not have been. If Ms. Ramdial was still on the national executive of the UNC, would she have been making those comments? No, they would not. So it's all about, and then not only that, are these people coming forward to assist the party about those same issues they may have to help the party? Everything is about the leadership? No.
All right. Are you of the view that if a political leader loses major elections and major consecutive elections, not just general elections, that individual ought to step aside and allow somebody else to carry the party forward, not necessarily stepping out of the party, not stepping out of the executive, but allowing somebody else to take the lead? Do you think that sort of initiative would have been more, not just heartwarming, but more demonstrative of a leader doing what is in the best interest of the development of the party in terms of grooming somebody else to take over? We have an aging alternative leader. Just like we have an aging prime minister. I am also of view that Mr. Rowley is of a certain age.
Well,
I'm here about grooming succession planning. What sort of succession planning you all have in place at UNC?
My friend, the answer to that is that no, there's no need to replace the leader at this point in time. Under Kamla Prasad Bisesa, my friend, we won the Sangre Grande Regional Corporation. We were able to get 5 seats in the San Fernando City Corporation. We were able to retain seats in the Tunapuna Piaco Regional Corporation. We were able to win a seat in the Arima Borough Corporation in a by-election.
I accept that.
Hold on. In the words of Robert Montano, let's not reach the Marlborough bush yet, right? So hold on. We must also understand that we had a by-election way before in Barataria. And under Kamala Prasad's leadership, she won it, right? There is and always will be those successive planning to come in, right? The leader has brought in a lot of young people into the party, such as myself. In many roles, you have MP Saddam Hussein and MP Anita Haynes. Khadija Amin is a young new MP. Vandana Mohit, right?
Khadija Amin has been around for many, many years. It's far from young. She's older in the politics than you and I could be.
Well, I will never say that about the young Khadija Amin.
All right. I hear you.
So just the point for it is that we have a lot of young people coming up, and a lot of young people, such as myself as well, we all have roles to play in the party, but we all have things to do. So these same detractors who want to go and hide behind fake profiles and want to call themselves different names and go into other pages called like a cabal page and attack the party and say what kind of nasty, derogatory things. Why not come together? Let's work together, right? Yes, you didn't win a seat. Yes, you didn't get back a seat. Does the world end there? No. My friend, I'm of the national exam. Yet I still work with the party. Hence, I'm in a different role now, right? So sometimes, and again, we must use the example of Dr. Tim Gopi Singh, a man who has shown he has no seat to operate with, and he's there thick and thin with the United National Congress. You understand what I'm saying, my friend? And I kudos to Dr. Glenn by saying as well that he will assist the party in any way forward. Did any of them else say that? No, they didn't. And I'm sure there is a role for Glenn to play.
Let me quote what I see in the newspaper here, right? This is I'm taking this quote from the 28th of June 2022, right? It's taken straight out of the Newsday newspaper. Prasad Bisesa is quoted as saying, "Your constant attacks, your constant ridicule and attempts to belittle the rank and file members of our party in order to advance your own selfish aims have again proven to be worthless." This is what she's saying upon assuming leadership once more. So she's actually telling her detractors that, all your attempts to belittle the rank and file, that you're proven wrong. She goes on to say, "There is no room for any political dynasty, caste, class in the UNC anymore." So it seems that language, let me say that again, there's no room for political dynasty, caste, and class in the UNC. It seems that she's throwing words, as we say, for people like Michaela Pandey, people like Vasant Bharat, who had a certain history in the party in terms of ancestral roots, and saying to these people in indirect language that there's no room for that in the party anymore. Is it that she's saying that people with political roots and history, like Ms. Pandey, Vasant Bharat, that these people will have to accept that she is going to do things her way and her style of leadership is to include other people at their expense and they are no longer welcome? Or is she saying that there's
everyone is welcome, my friend, but a leader must be able to do what the leader has to do. You must understand that the leader has opened up avenues for new persons to come in, for other persons to be within the UNC, right? You have to also
why hasn't the language, the olive branch that she extends is always in figurative language? She has never openly said that I'm welcoming Vasant Bharat to come and sit and chat with me. I'm welcoming these people at a forum, to sit at the table and we all chat and have a very cordial discussion rather than the rabble-rousing and the exchange of words taking place in a newsprint, because it doesn't read very well, Brian. When these things are being said, shots are being taken, Scud missiles are being thrown through the verbatim of newsprint and social media, because your detractors, the People's National Movement, and anybody who's opposed to the UNC politically, that is, this is fodder for the fire. This is going to generate a lot of unnecessary talk.
Well, Farid, my friend, I hear you. But you also have to understand, we have a media who likes to stir bacchanal and stir issues. But I want to invite you, Farid, come to our Monday night meetings. The leader has always said she's welcoming everyone. You must remember as well that when it is that she fought Vasant in 2015, she offered him the Senate position back. She didn't take it
I
away.
agree.
Right? Further to
I
that,
agree.
has always said that when we have formed a lot of committees in the party, and I'm repeating that because I said it before, and she has said, let you all can come and help in those committees. When we have budget day, for an example, the leader opens up the party to persons that come and give their views on what they would like to see addressed in the budget. Mr. Barrett is a very known financial man. Maybe he can bring his views on the budget, but he will not do that, will he? So at the end of the day, my friend, the leader will always offer to help. But you can't be, you offer to help, but yet you're going around in other places and saying some of the most derogatory things towards the leader. Some of the nasty things you want to say to the leader. So she must just take that? No,
No,
she
but
was
yet the leader
she's,
must also
she's a
be an
former prime
example.
minister,
The leader
right?
must also be an example, and despite what is being said, pull him in a corner, have a chat with him, and try to correct things. My thing is the verbal volleys that are being thrown is being read not just by UNC supporters, but it's being read and editorially being carried universally. So it doesn't speak well. Now let's move
My
on to something different. Let's move
Before
on
you
to
move
something
on,
different.
my friend, the best example I can give you is that you had a trade union movement that protested bitterly against the People's Partnership. And you just saw the other day where the unions met with Mrs. Bissessa. The same unions that they were saying, don't talk to them, don't talk to them. And they came to her and she met with them and said, listen, we will meet whatever has to be done. Because listen, my friend, we all must come together. Every one of us, we must be united in one front because there is one leader, one party, and there is one goal, which is to remove the People's National Movement. I invite Mr. Nore to join us. I invite you to join us as well, my friend. Because at the end of the day, the United National Congress, led by Kamala Prasad Bissessa, in government has showed great performances. And I'm sure Mr. Nore would agree with me on that. I don't know if his allegiances otherwise would allow him.
I think that is you're attempting to invite me into the conversation. I'm listening to you, Mr. Big. What could I say? You said the UNC is all open to everyone. You all have achieved some stuff. I like the conversation. I'm enjoying the conversation. Yes, and I believe what you are saying is true. But you have to forgive me. I'm PNM. Forgive me. But thanks for the invitation. It doesn't mean because I'm PNM, I can't speak openly. I do. And the UNC has its position in this country, its philosophy, and they have a right to represent people in this country and try to get back into government to add value the way they would want to see the country advance. And that's their democratic right. The PNM has that right too and seem to have about the most amount of political parties I've ever seen in the history of this country and the outside that looking to do the same. And they're all right. Look at what happened in Tobago and Farley and Duke and the new movement in Tobago. So this is our country. Anyone who wants to knows Farid might lead a party someday. Since he's on here with me, he's becoming more and more politically astute. Don't be surprised to see him one day launching a party, and I would listen to him and wish him all the best too. So
that ain't up, Richard. I can
right.
say that.
You can never tell.
So
I wish the United National Congress all the best. I wish the PNM all the best. I wish all the parties all the best. At the end of the day, whoever gets in, try to represent all the people of our country. That's the best that I could say. Try to pursue policies that will result in creating opportunities for the wider percentage. Let me tell you, you are elected to government in particular to help the poor, because the rich people don't really need support of the government. They want something tweaked here and tweaked here so they can get on with their business. It's the poor man who needs help.
Happy that Richard Nore would say those things, because after all, we just had an increase in flour, we had an increase in gas. What next is to go up? We have a prime minister, we don't know where he is, when he coming home.
Brian, I hear you. Brian, allow me to say this. And I want you to comment on this issue. I want your view. You don't necessarily have to tell me what the party would want you to see. We have a situation in this country where we have a lot of mudslinging that takes place from the political platform. people say a lot of things, and it makes our politics look very, very unsanitary. My position is this, and I'm saying this on both sides. Yes, I'm trying to be balanced in what I'm in my rhetoric here. Again, I'm looking at the newsprint, the 6th of June, 2022, not long ago. Ramona Ramdial was carrying one of her editorials. I am no fan of Ramona Ramdial. I like to read what everybody has to say. So don't make me feel, don't put it across that, you know, riding a tide here. She's saying, and I'm quoting, in a dog whistling stroll down our racist politics memory lane, we are reminded of Eric Williams when he minted the hostile and recalcitrant minority. So she's referring to an expression coined by Williams. She's saying that that in itself was a racist slanted when he referred to the Indo population here as the hostile and recalcitrant minority. Then she goes on to say, in reference to the Indo-Trinidadian foray into politics, Patrick Manning referenced Petro-Trin as Petro-Sing at one time. So he and all was playing on the race card in her words. Then they mentioned the ever famous one, Hilton Sandy, who when speaking in Roxborough on that platform that I believe that Mr. Rowley was on the platform at the time, when Sandy, who preceded him in speaking, mentioned that there was a Calcutta ship coming to Tobago and you have to be careful about welcoming it, so to speak. And naturally, the Calcutta ship analogy, that hinted as the Indian party or the Indo party coming to Tobago and coming to take over. Then we had Fitzgerald Hines talking about alligators in a murky lagoon. I guess I think that was in reference, and you could correct me, to that Caroni situation, the Caroni River and that lagoon and all those people that come out of that area and the things that they have to say. Let me round it off by another example. That little exchange between Kamala Prasad Bisesa and Camille Robinson Regis, however it came out. Again, I'm not taking any sides here. I'm saying that maybe Robinson Regis had a part to play in pushing the alternative political leader in a particular direction, but the political leader took the bait and she responded alternatively. This sort of rhetoric to the listening public, the people who really outside there, you know, I'm talking about the fair-minded observer, you know, as we say it, not the fair-minded observer sitting there with all the wisdom and knowledge of somebody who experienced a good life. The common man on the street who couldn't care less about anything. When he hears this, and there are a lot of people, the rank and file, they begin to feed into that sort of narrative when they hear these sort of hooks and clips, and they're swayed by this sort of language. So are you of the view that the politicians need to sanitize their language and there's supposed to be a certain level of ethical conduct demonstrated by both leaders?
My friend,
do you have no issue with the sort of language that is being carried in the public space?
My friend, once you enter into the political guile, right? And I will quote a former Prime Minister, Mr. Basdeo Pandey, that you must have the back broad and thick skin, like I taught us, to be able to handle anything said and anything put to you. Because that is the game of politics. That is the game of how it is. That you've had in the most first world of nations, where you saw two bitter rivals went at it, called Donald Trump and Joe Biden. And they also said things. And they went at each other. We just saw in Britain where it happens as well. So once you know you're going into the political guile, my friend, you have to be prepared to hear things being said to you and things for you to say back. If you can't, well, guess what? There's an old saying, politics is not for the fair-hearted, right? This is not a tea party. This is not a tea party, my friend. Because when you say things and you want to say things that are so derogatory, or you want to say things in an attacking format, well, guess what? When you say it, be prepared to take it back. Because the
spoken word, you would agree with me that the spoken word and the sparrow are things that you can't call back, you know, you can't recall these things. And these things tend to haunt our political leadership and our politicians for eternity.
Well, of course.
It stays in the public space and it stays in the minds of the public. So when it is you try to sell your slate
Because when
and
you're
persons
prime
are
minister,
looking in.
because when you're a prime minister who say, I am not closing down Petrotrin, unless you didn't hear me when you went to look something in the fridge, I will say it again. I am not closing down Petrotrin, and Petrotrin was closed. When you had a man who sit in Petrotrin and say, all must go, all, and all is gone. And when you had a man, when you had 5 people inside a tank or tube, and they were dying, and they said, there's no need to go and save nobody, right? So
there's a court of law that's going to be dealing with that, and we have a commission of inquiry that is going to deal with that pariah situation and the diver.
When? It's not yet? When?
It has to happen. It has to happen.
It has to, it must to, but the question is, when? We had a commission, the president of the commission, he gone. New one come. It's not yet? When? When? Maybe Mr. Nori can tell us when it's going to start.
I don't think Mr. Nori will be able to tell us. He's sitting where I'm sitting too. So we're both looking.
He's my friend.
I would leave that up to Farid. Mr. Big, as my co-host.
Yeah,
when I raised the gas once, I raised it twice, I raised it 3 times, no one riot. I should raise it a 4th time. And he did it, right? You had a person who said, well, bread gone up. What we gonna do? Let them eat cake. We saw what happened to that person, right?
Be careful what you're saying here. That song is seditious. That song like you could be answering to another body soon.
My friend, I am speaking about what happened in France in the 1800s.
I like your parallel reasoning. That ain't happening in Trinidad. We whatever happens in Trinidad, I could tell you this: we wouldn't be sending to Guyana where there's race riots, because we have our release valves in this country that other countries don't have, and there is nothing that is going to take us to that point.
My friend Farid, one thing I will tell you is that, and I will say it again. You asked, and I will say it again, because I believe you. I don't know how much time we'll have again.
No,
the United Nations is a party open to all bodies, to all persons. That let us come together. Let us come together and work under Kamla Prasad predecessor, and let us remove this regime called the People's National Movement, led by a prime minister who he come back yet, Farid? Where
I live in Turkey, not Piaco. I don't know if it is back yet. I know he's due, according to the newsprint, he's due back on Thursday. So I expect to be hearing his voice loud and clear from us.
Come on, Farid. We must tell the people as it is. Let us focus on the fact that we have a prime minister who has some questions to answer, I understand. 2, you have a minister in government who has some shady questions to answer, right? I mean, we can't foster around. We have to make sure that those questions are answered. We also have an issue where we have a discrimination happening geographically. We just had some flooding just yesterday. What is happening? We have a minister of local government saying, well, I'm giving you sandbags. Okay, thanks. Right? But you have rivers need to be dredged, and that hasn't been done yet. The penal debe, and let me pronounce it properly, yeah? The penal debe, I understand someone tried to pronounce as penal dabai. I don't know where dabai is, right? Right? These are real issues. And it's the United National Congress as the rightful party who will form the next government will deal with these things. And I say again to my brothers and sisters who would have contested an election, yes, you were not successful, but you are still a member of the UNC, and come and join with us, join with me, join with Kamla Prasad Bisasa. And I open that invitation to all of you all there as well.
I have a final question for you, and a closing remark will arise out of that final question from you. Are you all making any adjustments to your constitution in order to accommodate voting in elections moving forward? Let's say online voting or an alternative form of voting, because we don't want a situation where 10% of the electorate turns up for reasons arising out of the climatic conditions or reasons arising out of any other disturbance. would you all be adjusting the constitution to cater for online voting or other alternative forms of voting where people can do it from the warmth and leisure of their homes?
Well, I can't comment.
Would that sort of adjustment be made? Is that on the table?
Well,
Because
I can't comment on that just yet, Fareed. The national executive the new elected national executive has not met us yet. We will meet very soon. As you know, there has to be sworn in and everything. And all ideas are welcomed, you know. And anything will be welcomed and will be listened to. And whatever the national executive takes a decision on, it will be a decision of the party. And we move forward on it. Until such time, we must remember that it is the UNC that brought about one party, one man, one vote. We had another party before that was going about using a delegates, which was very wrong. And then they went from one man to one party. I think that party is called the PNM. Isn't that right, Mr. Nori?
I hear you.
No, I don't know about one party. I don't know about the latter. I do agree the UNC was one man, one vote before us. And while I wouldn't say we followed the UNC, they did it before us, and we had a delegate system. We felt more wisdom was an
so Mr. Nori, you answered my question, man. It was the PNM that followed the UNC.
I didn't say that. What I'm saying is the UNC had the one man, one vote before us. And then we saw the need to go that route too. I didn't know we follow. It might have been internal considerations to satisfy the demands that were being made and put forward by the membership of the party. And so they acquiesced it, and that's how it is. But to say they sat down and it was a conscious decision to follow, you do take a conscious decision to follow. No, I think it was internal expressions, and the full democracy within the party decided to give way. They voted on it, and they say yes, and the democratic process won out. And today we have one man, one vote.
And that is to show as well, Fareed, that the United National Congress is the truest form of a democratic political party. We show that democracy reigns within our party.
When we had the delegate system, Mr. Big, that too was democracy. It was a different form of democracy that the party embraced because you had to elect the delegate. So everyone was still voting, and look at how it works. Let me tell you, in the constituencies, the party groups would elect a delegate from their party group.
Mr. Nori, you know
one delegate per party group.
Very well.
Yeah,
we have to thank Mr. Beige. We have to thank Mr. Beige for making himself available and wrap things up. So maybe you can make your closing remark there now, Richard, so we can send Mr. Beige off to his evening chores.
It's nice to see you again, Mr. Big. It's always a pleasure. I hope you come back soon. I enjoyed the conversation. It was nice listening in. I mean, Mr. Big, you are evolving into a full-blown politician. For me, say, you know, you're young, but you're old fella in the politics, you know. Keep up the good work. I wish you all the best.
Take care,
I would just like to say thank you again. I'm always make myself available to you, Fareed, and to Power 102. I am no stranger to them. And I say again, I will close with this, that the United National Congress is the way to go. Long live Kamala Prasad Bisasa and long live the UNC. Thank you, my friend. And you all stay safe. It's still raining outside heavy.
Take it easy. Enjoy the rest of the day.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well.
Oh, Lord. Richard, you know, I don't like politics, you know. I don't like, I ain't like the
Your turn for leading a party will come someday, Fareed.
No. And if
it gets into your blood, and you.
No, it ain't gonna happen. Anytime that happens,
I'm with shake off being an attorney and shake on being a politician, you know.
But
anytime that happens, you and David free to find me somewhere and talk with them.
Mr. Big wants to, yeah.
Are we off now? Are we off?
Yeah, we off. Yeah, we off.
Fareed, you know you're not too far from where my office is. My friend, membership form here if you want. Feel free to come and join me.
I hear you.
And Mr. Nori, I still have that form for you still. I know Skippy ever gave it yet.
Thomas brought a whole suitcase. Of application form. Every day I leave and he give him one out the same suitcase. And I asked him if I returned it. But you can't sign up to two parties at the same time. I'm a member of the People's National Movement, and that doesn't mean I'm slighting any other party. It doesn't mean that. It's just that I'm on the PNM side here.
Fareed, I will tell you this. I know Mr. Nori. I worked at Sawa Laventille for 10 years. I know Mr. Nori when he was an alderman there, right?
No, councillor.
Councillor, right, councillor.
Yeah,
Sorry.
Yeah.
Right?
And Mr. Big was quite a nice guy. He controlled the councillors section. They took our office away and they gave it to Mr. Big, you know. I mean, he operated out of that office, but he ran things quite smoothly. We were pleased. So he's a decent guy. I think it's a breath of fresh air to politics, and I hope he grows in that way and adds the type of value that we know the politics is in search of today that is now absent. So I hope that...
Say that on air next time, Mr. Nori.
As we're in air right now, you know, Mr. Big? We're in air right now. We're not
so
all...
we'll chat again.
Yeah.
It's good to
have Sure. Take care.
Bye.
All right. Who's our next guest, Fareed?
Well, I think it's only Mr. Big. Yeah.
Oh, I see.
Yeah.
So Richard, where we were discussing the I was saying to David that in the public space within the last couple of weeks, issues are rising out of the purpose and the function of the Integrity Commission. That was being vented and ventilated in the public space. I mean, it was carried in the newsprint that there were issues arising out of that office. So before you visually joined us, you would have been hearing before. I was discussing that the Integrity Commission, its purpose is really an oversight body to monitor people in public office. And particularly politicians, particularly persons in the House of Representatives, in the Senate. Anybody who is holding a position on a statutory board, on a state board, that sort of thing. And the monitoring process, there's a structure to it. There is legislation, the Integrity in Public Life Act, that it's one of its manifestations would have been the 1987 Act. Then there was the amendment in 2000, and there was an amendment thereafter. But just like we have the Police and Complaints Authority, or the Police Complaints Authority, where when civilians out there have issues with the police, and they believe that the police are harassing them or ill-treating them, or there has been a death in the public space, or death somewhere, and issues arise or may have arisen that the police may have been the authors of that, then the Police Complaints Authority would tend to investigate that death and try to make determinations as to whether there's some culpability, liability lying with officers involved. And we have this ever popular one now arising out of June 2020 when those two persons in Mova were shot, and video footage captured those individuals with their hands in the air in a surrendering kind of notion. And yet still what came after that was volleys of gunfire, and they were well, the three of them died. Let us put it that way. I don't want to use any other adjective. So there's an investigation arising out of that sort of activity, and we don't know where that may go. We understand that it's some 18 officers under investigation. So in the same manner, and I'm saying this purely for the ears of the public listening out there, in the same manner that there's a Police Complaints Authority that looks into the actions of police officers, and you could complain or lay a complaint at Building D on Rising Road there, as it speaks to their behavior and how they comport themselves and so on. There's also a parallel body, if I may put it that way, or another existent body, the Integrity Commission, and that their responsibility is a responsibility gloved and beholden to examining persons in public office. So the most popular example is the 1987, within the provisions of the 1987 Act, we had a former Prime Minister, Mr. Basdeo Pandey. He would have been charged because arising out of a factual scenario, or alleged facts, but a scenario all the same, that spoke to him having monies deposited into an account, Westminster Bank, Wimbledon, England, where it basically came into the public space that he did not declare those assets, incomes, and liabilities. In this case, deposits into an account that he did, and those deposits not having been declared was an affront to a provision in the Act. Now, arising out of that, charges were preferred, and he was sentenced by the then Chief Magistrate, Sherman McNichols, to a maximum term of 2 years imprisonment plus a fine. Let me say one time before this talk evolves any further that eventually in 2012, those charges were discontinued against Mr. Pandey. So though he was convicted upon appeal, and then a Court of Appeal decision which ruled that the Chief Magistrate decision to convict him was clouded in bias, and there were reasons given for the overturning of the decision. And then what arose out of that is we had a discontinuance of the matter in 2012. All the same, what was ventilated in the public space is that our dear Prime Minister committed a summary offense and had to answer to this to wrongdoing. Something like that happening, David, if I may say, gives a clear indication that democracies that work in Trinidad and Tobago, that it doesn't matter what office you hold, you are still beholden to the rule of law and the administration of justice. That doesn't necessarily mean that you don't pay a political price, because when your name is put out there and sufficient damage is done in terms of the editorial, the newsprint, in this time and age, the social media carrying these subliminal messages and saying things and inviting public opinion. Sometimes the court vindicates you, but your name is forever associated with something. Allow me to say this. I gave an example of what happened to our Prime Minister, or then Prime Minister, Mr. Pandey, back in, this would have been in the early 2000s. We have a situation where the current Prime Minister, Mr. Rowley, remember that landate issue, Richard, where it was said that material was being siphoned from a job site from the Scarborough Hospital area and taken to a site in Mason Hall in Tobago. And two witnesses, according to the ruling, I don't want to just say these things, I like to refer to material.
Well, nothing could beat data, so get your information, Farid. Get your information to substantiate the expressions.
I'm looking at a judgment here, a civil judgment, 2007, 00185. It's a High Court ruling. The matter of the Integrity in Public Life Act, it was raised under the Amendment 2000 between Keith Christopher Rowley and the Integrity Commission. What I can say is the issues are arising out of this, and I'm referring to page 22 of a 46-page judgment. It was carried in the judgment. It was said that an allegation of siphoning material out of a Scarborough Hospital job site into a development space in Mason Hall, Tobago, seemed to link our Prime Minister to being part and parcel of that. In other words, he had an interest in the development in Tobago. What came out in the judgment is he didn't have a personal interest. Another member of his family had a development taking place there. According to the judgment, it would have been Mrs. Clark Rowley. Our Prime Minister wasn't linked in any way to that particular investment. But yet still, two persons brought into the public space issues that he had an interest to bear in what was taking place there. Mr. Rowley very vehemently and very vociferously denied any involvement, and he was prepared to answer to any allegation raised. And let me put this way. I'm quoting from page 22 of the 46-page judgment. The initial siphoning allegations were generated by Ganga Singh, Dr. Rowley's political opponent. That's the first person. The second person is another individual. I don't know if his name might be familiar to you, but I'm quoting it all the same. The allegations were continued in the public in a public commission of inquiry by one Barrington Thomas, another political opponent of the claimant. So Barrington Thomas and Ganga Singh brought into the public space and were prepared to very vociferously put out
Is
there
that
that,
is that Barrington Thomas whom we know?
well, I believe he could be of the Skippy orientation. But
I
David could correct me. David could correct me if I'm wrong.
yes.
I'm always open to being corrected.
Hold on, Daddy Mac. Daddy Mac.
It is. It is. Yeah.
Oh, this mud flower, he know to fly into situations.
I,
God,
So
God, Perine.
what we need to bear in mind is this. The decision at the end of the day was determined in favor of Mr. Rowley. And there was very clear legal basis and legal grounds established where it showed that the Integrity Commission committed a wrong on Dr. Rowley. There is, David, if you remember some weeks ago, we were speaking about the library environment or environ protectors.
Yeah.
They had brought a claim against Petrotrin saying that because of their negligent actions, gas emissions were being emitted into the area and persons within libraries suffered.
Yeah.
They brought a claim for damages before the court to hold Petrotrin accountable for their actions. Remember we spoke about that?
Yeah, I remember that.
Right. Now, what I was saying is the claim that was being brought was a claim in what we call the tort of negligence. Tort, T-O-R-T, is a legal term which basically reflects that you have a legal remedy available to you if you can establish certain things. So it's not the tort. When you bring somebody before the court for breach of a tort, you must be able to prove certain things when you bring them to the table. When you bring them before the court, you have a responsibility. And I was saying with the library environ protectors, they must show that Petrotrin owed a duty of care to the citizens of library, to those individuals there who live in the community. And that duty of care would involve they having a responsibility to ensure they did all that was necessary and reasonable to protect those persons as they conduct the activity, meaning Petrotrin knows that they have to ensure that their pipes and their lines are connected in a particular way, that there aren't gas emissions and spills into the ocean space, things that would compromise the health of the persons there. Once you can establish that that duty was breached and protocols wasn't followed, then you have to then, having done that, reflect that Petrotrin owed a duty of care, and when they breached that duty, persons suffered loss. If persons didn't suffer loss, David and Richard, then what would happen is you can't prove any damages. You can't prove that you suffered sufficiently to warrant the court triggering the need to offer damages to the persons in compensation for wrong suffered. Having said that, parallelly, where we are with this situation and the Integrity Commission, when it is you have a commission set up, the commission's responsibility, they have a fiduciary duty to ensure that they act in a certain way, that when it is you begin to investigate persons, that you're investigating persons from a position where you have clear evidence of something. There's evidential value to the things that you raise. You can't go on a fishing expedition. So let us say we have Prime Minister involved in an investment of some kind, or he appears to be involved in an investment of some kind, and material is being siphoned from a place in Scarborough, the hospital, to an area in Mason Hall that he may have an interest in, and you're raising that as an issue. You have to bear in mind that the office holder, if he's interpreted to be a man involved in something outside of that can't stand up to probity, then what you're doing is you're affecting his character and how the people interpret him out there. And public image is important, because when you sell yourself as a person of integrity and people repose confidence in you on a day-to-day basis to represent their interests, they expect the highest standards. You don't put a smart man to lead. You put a man of integrity to lead. So what arose out of this this exercise with Mr. Rowley is that the Integrity Commission was proven to have acted outside of their remit. They were wrong. And there is what we call, and this is the analogy that I was coming to, a tort of misfeasance for those who hold such a position. You have a responsibility, meaning the commission has a responsibility to ensure that they don't commit or they aren't found guilty of the tort of misfeasance in public office. The Integrity Commission, in the same way we have the tort of negligence, the Integrity Commission, they are bound by a tort of not committing misfeasance while in public office. So what they're saying is that the Integrity Commission must act in good faith. For them to say that, or for them to investigate Dr. Rowley without doing their homework and without having proper evidence, basically what they're doing is they could be tarnishing his name. And let me evolve where we are and the details of that landate inquiry in some small detail I'm going into. The position is simply this. It was found that Dr. Rowley was not properly informed as to whether what was the case against him. He was not properly given an opportunity not only to be told what is the case against him, but he wasn't given an opportunity to respond. So if there's an allegation against you and I, or an allegation against Richard, in this case an allegation against the Prime Minister, however it is raised by one Mr. Ganga Singh or Mr. Barrington Thomas, these persons must be able to provide things of evidential value. Now, Ganga Singh, when he was called before a commission, when they established a commission of inquiry to inquire into this landate issue, which is the Integrity Commission, that commission of inquiry would have invited Ganga Singh to come and offer evidence, because he raised in the parliament that material was being siphoned from one site in Scarborough to the development in Mason Hall. When Ganga Singh was called to come and answer to the commission of inquiry, he did not go. He did not make himself available whatsoever. So in other words, when the time came to put your money where your mouth is, or to put your shoulder to the wheel and talk the talk and walk the walk, Ganga Singh failed to do either of either, if we put it that way. Barrington Thomas stepped forward, and I'm looking at the judgment. Richard, allow me to quote it here, right? So I know Mr. Thomas can't say I'm quoting in any way.
No, yes.
It was said here, and I'm quoting, the allegations were continued in the public commission of inquiry by one Mr. Barrington Thomas. That is the allegation concerning the siphoning of the material. Another admitted political opponent of the claimant. So he's referring to the fact, the judgment is referring to the fact that he's a political opponent of Mr. Rowley. And who the commission of inquiry, and they're making a statement of Mr. Thomas now, and who the commission of inquiry categorically found to be a false witness in specific reference to his testimony relating to Dr. Rowley. The witness testimony was dismissed and expressly not relied upon by the Integrity Commission. So, in other words, the one person who offered evidence at the commission of inquiry level was totally, absolutely, and collectively discredited in terms of what he's saying. And they went so far to say, based on what he was giving viva voce, was saying at the inquiry, when called upon and when giving answers, that it went against the very substance of the sworn statement he gives. So in other words, when you're being questioned about something and you're offering evidence, you supply an affidavit of what you have to say. An affidavit is equivalent to your evidence. And you put nothing but truth in that document, and you certify the document, and then you have it commissionerized. In a manner of speaking, there's a declaration done with it, and the declaration will speak to that you understand that what you say here is your language and it is the truth, and you prepare to stand by it. So when it is you do that and you endorse your name against a written document, you have to be prepared to defend the document. When it is he came before the commission of inquiry and he offered evidence, and they had that affidavit before them and they listened to what he's saying, there was a contradistinction in terms of his content. in terms of what he's offering orally and what is in the document before them. So that inconsistency didn't help very much. It didn't carry the narrative he was carrying on to prove the allegation he was raising. So having been discredited, that in itself put paid to the task of offering anything of substance against Mr. Rowley. Now moving past that, and this is what I want the public to understand. This is not just political ring-rang talk I'm going it with. I'm saying this is the judgment reflected that when the Integrity Commission, that body that is established to engage public officials, when that function that they exercise on a day-to-day basis, that is a very serious function. The commission consists of a chairman. The commission consists of also a deputy chairman. It consists of 3 other persons: a lawyer with 10 years standing, a chartered accountant or a certified accountant, and it allows for 1 other person. So it's not a wishy-washy body. It's qualified persons who have a certain mindset and who took a pledge to execute their function in a manner that is free from any sort of favor and free from any fear. If we were just to bring into focus a more recent example, we had this Marlene McDonald situation where she ascended into political office somewhere in 2015. She was given a portfolio. Then an allegation was raised where it was being said, it is alleged that, she was responsible for monies going into a certain...
She was a minister before 2015,
Yeah, I'm just tracing. She was there even before in 2008, as far back then.
Yeah.
I'm tracing. The issue I'm raising is one of within that 2015 to the 2020 period. I'm tying it into the Integrity Commission. What happened is in 2015, when it is that an issue arose as it relates to monies that went to the Khalifa Foundation, that she may have had a hand in it getting there, siphoning money in that area. That was the allegation. She was relieved of that portfolio, and then the Integrity Commission began an investigation as to whether she acted in any way to compromise her office and whether action need to be taken against her. A parallel investigation was being conducted by the police. The investigation, in terms of the police investigation, that came to an end. In other words, they saw no reason to prefer any charges, and they saw no reason in terms of the investigation to act in any way based on what the evidence that they had before them and the allegation that was raised. In other words, she was vindicated on some level from any aspersions as to acting in a way that she ought not have acted. But while that was going on, the Integrity Commission was still investigating her. Dr. Rowley came out and he reinstated her, not necessarily in the same position, but he gave her another portfolio. And people were saying that, she got a second political life and was able to carry another portfolio within the dispensation of the 2015-2020 term. And that why that ought to have been done, Dr. Rowley came out very vociferously and said that the Integrity Commission has shown itself to lack integrity in itself, that they raised allegations against him in the past. The police have discontinued those allegations, and yet still they haven't completed their task, and they're taking, well, he wasn't saying they're taking that long, but they were in fact carrying on a parallel investigation. The police finished before theirs, and they were still continuing. So Rowley, I'm saying that to say this: the Prime Minister felt that the Integrity Commission, he wasn't putting much stock in the activity because they have been known to infringe on people's rights and they have a track record of being wrong. They were wrong as it relates to him. And if the police discontinued against Ms. McDonald, then who are they to be still lingering with their investigation? She was given another portfolio, and then, well, we know what transpired. She's no longer there because the police got new evidence, and let's not be interfere with the rule, the sub judice rule, that is going to ventilate itself in the courtroom. But the point I'm making is the Integrity Commission, again, within recent times, their purpose was questioned, and their purpose was questioned in a manner that was not consistent with they fulfilling their obligations. In other words, they ain't working, they ain't doing what they're supposed to do. And when they do act, they're acting in a way that costs the taxpayers money. Well, in that matter, and we're getting back to the land aid matter with Dr. Rowley, the Integrity Commission caused this, the taxpaying public of Trinidad and Tobago, and this was the ruling. The taxpaying public of Trinidad and Tobago had to pay damages to our Prime Minister to the value of $100,000 with interest at the rate of 12% per annum from the 10th of August 2007 until the court ruling, which was some years after, 2009, I believe that ruling came into the public space. So as a result of they not performing and doing what they're supposed to do, and the ruling going in favor of Dr. Rowley and totally exonerating and vindicating him of the allegations, they were found to be guilty of the tort of misfeasance, and they acting in bad faith. And as a result of that, money had to be paid to Dr. Rowley in damages. The issue that arose is this. When it is an allegation is raised against an individual, the law simply indicates that the individual has a right to be informed. The Integrity Commission acted in such a way that they presented information and sent it to the Director of Public Prosecution's office. Had the DPP office investigate Mr. Rowley, the DPP's office handed over the file to the TTPS, and the TTPS in turn conducted their parallel investigation. What Mr. Rowley is saying, and according to the Act, the Integrity in Public Life Act, let me refer to Section 33 and Section 38. That very process, that line I took there, they've breached the line. When an individual is being investigated, according to Section 33 of the Act, the Commission may, 33 subsection A, may on its own initiative or shall upon the complaint of any member of the public consider and inquire into the alleged breaches of the Act or allegations of corrupt or dishonest conduct. So in other words, if they make their own observation, they could investigate, or if there's a complaint, like Ganga Singh and Barrington Thomas make a complaint, the Integrity Commission could investigate. But when they investigate, according to Section 38 of the very same Act, no report, and I'm quoting here, no report concluding that a person to whom this Act applies has failed without reasonable justification to fulfill a duty or obligation under this Act shall be made until reasonable notice has been given to such person. In other words, Mr. Rowley ought to have been given reasonable notice of an allegation being raised against him by Ganga Singh and Barrington Thomas, and given a fair opportunity to respond. The Integrity Commission prepared their report based on what was said by these individuals. Send the report to the DPP's office, the Director of Public Prosecution's office. The police got involved and continued an investigation. Mr. Rowley wrote to the Integrity Commission and indicated to them, listen, if there's an allegation against me, I have the right to respond. I am not going to sit back and stay quiet and have people say things about me. I'm not getting a fair opportunity to respond. In other words, natural justice allows that if it is Richard Norrie accuses me of doing something, Richard ought to, yes, he's free to raise it for one or two and say, well, I don't like the things Farid's saying, But natural justice should allow that I should be given an opportunity to explain my position, to defend myself, to be able to say, well, Richard, you're mistaken in what I say, you misinterpret what I say. I didn't mean it in this particular way. And at least if a finding is made at the end of the day, after I explain my position that you were correct and I was wrong, or you were correct in your interpretation as opposed to me, at least I got an opportunity to say something. Not you, a backroom talk take place, and then I was informed, well, boy, we don't want you here anymore, right? We found that you was doing things in a way that, we didn't like, and you was contravening certain core principles, and I don't even know what the principles were. I wasn't given an opportunity to explain myself or to be at least respond to the situation. And this is where Dr. Rowley was. The Act clearly indicates under 33 that you could raise the allegation, you're free to do it. But the Act also allows for reasonable notice to be given to such persons, meaning in this case the Prime Minister, of all of the alleged failure, and the person has been allowed a full opportunity to be heard either in person or by counsel. So Mr. Rowley would have had an opportunity to present himself and explain himself as to what is being what is taking place at that point in the development in Mason Hall. It's 8.8 hectares of land. I am not the investor. It's a member of my family. I have no interest in what's taking place there, contrary to what Mr. Barrington Thomas may be saying, or contrary to what Mr. Ganga Singh, my political opponent, is saying. If they are saying that I have an interest to bear, well, then they ought to provide what is the proof that I have an interest to bear in such an issue, because they can't just be saying that and it's proven that I'm in no way am I connected to what's happening up there. I should be allowed to show documents which reflecting that if investments are being made, it's not coming out of my coffers. It's not coming out of my pocket. I have nothing to gain out of that. And so he was denied that opportunity. So it's the Integrity Commission of all people. They owe their very existence to legislation. They are creature of statute, and they ought to know the statute that breathes life into their existence. They ought to exercise their mandate in a way that is consistent with the document. The document speaks for itself. Let me use another example and to perhaps jar the public's interpretation out there of what is happening. Do you remember one particular member, Dr. Eric Sincere, years ago? Sincere, as way back as 2011, he was a serving member of the Integrity Commission, and when the People's Partnership they had formed government and they were in active government, there were issues that arose. Ms. Prasad Bisesa had spent some time at a residence, the Gopal residence in Tunapuna. And then not too long after, that particular company carrying the same Gopal name, that company would have the beneficiary of a government contract, a very sizable, lucrative contract. So Sincere came out and he said in the open space that, she ought not to have stayed at that residence whilst being Prime Minister, or even though she had now ascended to office at any point in time, because it doesn't speak well, meaning the public is interpreting what they're seeing. So Sincere came out and he made that comment. He also made a comment about Jack Warner when he said that because of his position in FIFA, he should not be assuming a position in government. And if I remember correctly, Mr. Warner, he didn't take kindly to that remark. He came out and said that, he's worried for the state of mind of Mr. Sincere, that he knew him as a university lecturer to be a very educated man because he was a former practicing economist and so on, very qualified, Cambridge graduate and so on, and Cambridge and Oxford graduate. So the mind that was making that comment was a learned mind. It wasn't the average person. And what arose out of that is a lot was said in the public space that spoke to the fact that here is a member of the Integrity Commission making a comment in the public space about persons in public office. And the commission, members of the commission came out and said that Mr. Sincere never discussed with them that he was going to put into the public space those comments as it speaks to Ms. Prasad Bisesa and it speaks to Mr. Warner. He made those comments and that arose out of his own initiative. So the legal point, again, tied back to the fact that we have an Integrity Commission, you're governed by an act, and the members of the commission ought to be, if you have to raise a complaint, Section 33 speaks to the fact that the commission itself can raise an issue with an individual in public office, or somebody can make a complaint to the commission, and if they think there is merit to it, they will investigate it. Sincere was not speaking when he said those things on behalf of the commission, and he certainly wasn't speaking as a result of an official complaint filed. He was speaking from a personal capacity. So in Trini language, they literally had to pull up Mr. Sincere had to pull up his socks and tell him, listen, this is not the way to conduct the business of the Integrity Commission, because the very purpose is an oversight body, and you ought to behave and conduct yourself in a particular way. Not that he was doing anything or saying anything that ought not to have been said, but the manner it is said and the opportunity to get someone to respond was important. In other words, Kamla Prasad Bisesa ought to have been given an opportunity when it is the issue is being raised, to raise it with her personally or in an official formal capacity before the issue is ventilated in the media or ventilated in the public space. In other words, you can't be tried on an issue as serious as this in the public space. When you say things like this and it is being carried in the media, a fair-minded observer looking at things from a public space, meaning the snow cone man, the man who travels on the red band maxi every day or taking maxi taxi every day, the man who observes things from the streets, he will be looking at that. And when he hears arguments like this and hears this sort of linen being cleaned in public, he forms an opinion on the Prime Minister. In those days, it would have been Kamala Prasad Bisesa. In the example I'm giving, it would have been with regard to Dr. Rowley and the land date issue. So when these things are being tried in the public space and the proper protocol isn't followed, a wrong is being committed on holders of public office. So we have a problem that is existing right now, Richard, and that problem arises out of more issues on the Integrity Commission. That problem, we have I like to quote what I'm reading here. When I look at the editorial of recent times, there's one dated the 29th of May 2022, and the headline taken out of the Sunday Express is, "The Integrity Commission seeks power to decide on staffing." It was being raised that between 2014 to now, there is so much declarations and registrable interests that have not been declared by persons in public office, that the Integrity Commission has not been able to get our public officials to make those declarations in the flow and the sequence and in quick pursuit as they should. Let me put it in very raw language. Between 2014 to now, all those persons, or a lot of persons in public office, have not declared what their assets, incomes, and liabilities are, and what their registrable interests are in certain businesses and in certain investments. So in not doing so, and those persons holding office not doing that or not fulfilling that mandate, the Integrity Commission is not in a position to monitor their lifestyle and to monitor their activity and what they do. So
how many people now have not done it?
Well, they're not saying how much, they're giving us a year. They're saying between 2014 to now, 2014 to 2022, that there is a backlog, and they have not been able to deal with the backlog as far back as 2014. And they're saying right now that 70%, they've been understaffed 70%, and they simply don't have the personnel to deal with the backlog, much more to deal with the current situation. Now, if that is indeed so, and this body is an oversight body whose responsibility and function is to monitor our public officials to ensure that they stay in line, then who is going to guard them? Who's going to guard our interests? The tax-paying public and people like you and me who are working hard every day to deal with inflation, to deal with increased costs, to deal with the things that we deal with. And we have persons in political office who are not fulfilling their mandate. I mean, they're all over us to do what we have to do, but they're not doing what they ought to do. Now, I'm not pointing fingers. I still haven't called any names, because according to the editorial here, all they've been saying is they've treated them with, in terms of they're saying, the commission is not being able to investigate those persons in public office, but they're not identifying by names. All they're saying is that there's a backlog. Now, hear what they're saying. There is no mandate in the Integrity and in Public Life Act that speaks to any moratorium. A moratorium meaning that, when it is you don't file your taxes for a period before 6 years ago, meaning 6 years and before, you have a 6-year period in which to make sure your taxes are paid year to year. And if it is for year 7 and year 8, 7 or 8 years, your statute bad. They can't come after you for anything within the last or outside of the last 6 years. What the Integrity Commission has done is that they have given a moratorium. They have granted a moratorium where they're not going to investigate you for the things you didn't declare over over a period of 6 years and beyond. They're asking you now to declare for within the last 6 years. Now, my thing is that according to the Act, the Integrity in Public Life Act, there is no provision in the legislation that speaks to the Commission being able to grant a jubilee or a moratorium to excuse persons who were in breach of the Act outside of a certain period. So there is, in other words, they're acting outside of the law. The very Commission.
Is there any part of the Act that gives them the authority sitting as a body to take a decision that they believe is in the best interest of the public?
It can't be in the best interest of the public, and the answer to that question is no. There is nothing that allows them to make that decision. Now, let me say this for the
you said just now that one person must have 10 years of this certified accountant and somebody as high quality people. How high quality people could sit and arrive at such a conclusion without being able to reference the authority that allowed them to operate in such a way?
Well, this is the big question that we found ourselves. This is the conundrum we found ourselves in. There's a commission, and the commission is not fulfilling its mandate, and the commission is acting outside of its mandate and contrary to the very act that it owes its existence. And the commission is granting.
I don't agree with the decision taken by them to do that, because it means from 2014 to now, somebody could have served at least one term, never declared anything, and you just tell them they're going free. So you never have to check that person out again, and that person could have benefited hugely during that time. So I'm not in agreement with that decision at all. But I would want to believe they must have given them some degree of discretion that could make them take such a decision, even if it requires a unanimous vote on the committee to do so. They must have seen something for real. Something would have led them to believe they could do that. I'm not in agreement with that decision, even if they had the power to do so. But I would want to give them the benefit of the doubt, given the caliber of people we're supposed to be talking about, that they would have seen or at least consulted an attorney to find out if they had any such flexibility, if there was any provision in the act that would allow them to decide something of that nature in such a way.
Allow me to quote what I'm reading here from the very article, and let me just repeat. I'm taking it out of the Sunday Express, the 29th of May 2022. One of the paragraphs reads, "In seeking to buttress its position, the Integrity Commission sought an opinion from the Solicitor General. The Solicitor General's opinion, according to the Commission's 2021 annual report, confirmed the view that the Commission remains an independent entity, since no person or authority can direct how the Commission exercises its powers and performs its function." It goes on to say the Commission's report cited Jamaican Senator Johnson Smith, who said the Commission was an autonomous creature of the Constitution, answerable to no one, and vested with sweeping and invasive powers over persons and bodies under its jurisdiction. So the Commission has a certain leverage and a certain amount of power. It's also independent and it's answerable to no one, meaning that it is free to act in a certain way when it wants information and when it wants to summon persons to answer. So I'm in agreement with what you're saying. I'm saying that being a crisis situation as it relates to what is happening now, and that issue needs to be resolved. And the current administration is looking into that situation. But we started this discussion by talking about this is not the first time we're dealing with a commission that has been acting in a capacity outside of its interests. In fact, it has been known. We had very learned minds. The composition of the commission in terms of having an attorney of 10 years standing, having a certified accountant sitting, and having educated minds and the best minds, the people of the highest moral standing sitting there, right? A chairman and a deputy chairman. This is the same chairman and the deputy chairman, not necessarily in the currently constituted board, Integrity Commission. but the same commission that drew Dr. Rowley through the calls, and at the end of the day, they didn't follow what the law says, which is when it is you inform him of his right to respond to the allegation that they were investigating against him. They went to the director of public prosecution's office with an affidavit indicating that this is the view that they formed on him, and they had the police, by extension and indirectly, the police launched an investigation into Dr. Rowley. The commission has acted, Richard, in a manner in the past that was outside of its mandate. This is nothing new. So you would think that, given the learned minds that are there and people with that level of intelligence and level of integrity, and whose appointment would have stood up to public scrutiny once they got there, there are examples in our constitutional history and our jurisprudential history that speaks that they're prepared to act in ways that are outside of the law. And I gave you an earlier example. Apart from Dr. Rowley, we had a prime minister who was reported to the Integrity Commission. They charged him. He was brought before the court. Well, when I say they raised the allegation, it was forwarded to the DPP's office. Anti-Corruption Bureau of Investigations investigated. Charges were preferred. The Prime Minister was brought before the court. He was convicted and sentenced to 2 years in jail. And all of this started at the behest of the serving members of the Integrity Commission. And it turned out that the charges were overthrown at a different level, and that Prime Minister was vindicated. So when we speak about, we are seeing things happening now, and they have given themselves a moratorium not to look into certain things beyond a certain time frame, which is not mandated in law. They've acted in a way that is not mandated by law in the past, and this current incarnation is acting no differently. I've given you an example with Mr. Pandey. This is back in 2002. Mr. Rowley in 2009. I've given you an example where we had Mr. Sincere speaking in 2011. We have now another situation in 2022. So historically, it seems like with all one's integrity, when you get to that commission and when you get involved there, something goes wrong or something goes amiss. And they start acting in a way that is inconsistent with their constitutional mandate.
The solution to it all is often you have heard the Integrity Commission has no integrity. You have heard that over the years. The problem with the Integrity Commission, or the problem that it faces all the time, is that it is appointed by a sitting government. You can say we want the president to do it, but the government appoints a president. Come on, they're all tied in. Say what you want. So constitutional reform to me, for the Speaker of the House, the President of the country, and the Integrity Commission, the Commissioner of Police, these people ought to be elected independently by the people of Trinidad and Tobago. And that would help. So when they sit in their office, they know politician A or politician B can't pull you, threaten you from either side. Your job security does not depend on them. It's the people who put you in that office. And an allocation in the budget must be made to your office annually, and that's what you operate with. So therefore, now you operate as a true a creature that you are, born by the Constitution or the law of Trinidad and Tobago, and the people are the ones who decided that you hold the office from now till then. And we will always have problems with the Integrity Commission until we allow the people of this country to vote for those persons. If Fareed wants to run to be in that commission, you're not running for a political party, you want to be one of the commissioners, if I could say that, then say so, come out and run and let the people vote. When we have the composition, we know that is the committee. So whoever is in office know that is the committee you had to deal with. Of course, they'll come up with provision to move them. If you find that you catch one in heavy negotiations with a government minister, you find the alignment too close, so there's a suspicion or conflict of interest. You come up with those things as it relates to governance, and if you catch them in violation of it, then it's grounds to come back to the people and you move them. You know, Parliament probably move you then. Yeah, a 2/3 majority, something of that nature. But putting people on the committee, that is what is required. Once we cannot do that, what you have done here today You will do it again next year. Somebody else will take up from you at some time in the future and come and talk the same thing. And what we are doing is not solving the problem. You have made some wonderful observation today. You have supported what you have done, call it a dissertation based on your research, that we do have a problem with the commission. How do we fix it? That's what we had to look at. How do we fix it? You know?
But let's look at something. We had a decision made this week by the Privy Council. I want to marry it another example. But before I establish that marriage between what the ruling this week as it relates to that Piaco inquiry, because that arose also with an issue arising out of the Integrity Commission and public officials. According to the Act, and I'm saying this for the listening public, the purpose of the Commission, according to Section 5, subsection A reflects the Commission shall, and shall means to say that they have to. Shall means they have to. The Commission shall carry out those functions. Carry out those functions and exercise the powers specified in this Act. And those powers would be, one of them would be to receive, examine, and retain all declarations filed with it under this Act. So in other words, if we were refer to contextualize it, it was discovered that Mr. Pandey didn't declare certain deposits of income, or certain deposits, not necessarily of income, but financial deposits in an account that he had in the UK. And in not declaring that, he was holding office 97, 98, 99 in those years, 1997, 1998, 99. Deposits for in an account abroad in his name and his wife's name reflected that there were monies there. And when the Commission examined his declarations, he never mentioned in the declarations those accounts and the monies that were there. So the function of the Commission is to call him in, make an inquiry, give him an opportunity to say, listen, you made certain declarations, but you didn't make this declaration. And we have information or reason to believe that you excluded certain things. And if you're excluded, you're in breach of your fiduciary duty, you're in breach of your responsibility. So in that way, now Mr. Pandey would have had an opportunity to respond. And he did respond. The evidence as it came out in trial, when a charge was preferred, is that Mr. Dupré made a scholarship deposit in his account, meaning extended to him a certain level of cash, and that was a scholarship fund to sponsor for the education of one of his children. So he gave an explanation as to how it came there. This is not the proceeds of anything criminal in whatsoever way. Then an explanation was also given by way of another witness. So Mr. Dupré offered that evidence in person, as we say in law, viva voce. He came and he offered himself and stood up to public scrutiny. Then another witness came out and indicated, well, the position would be that in Hindu families, the women conduct the financial transactions, and he could only declare what he knows or what was within his knowledge. So to the best of his ability, when it is he was referring to what his assets, incomes, and liabilities were, he gave the information as best as he knew it at the time. And even if it is the funds were in the account and he didn't declare it, he was able to provide information afterwards as it relates to, well, how that came to be there. All of that is within the law. That is his duty to respond and his opportunity to respond at the appropriate time. Having said that, we're going through the Act again. Another function of the Commission, it shall make such inquiries as it considers necessary in order to verify or determine the accuracy of a declaration filed under this Act. Further, compile and maintain a register of interests. So if Richard Norrie has a limited liability company, or maybe he doesn't have, Norrie doesn't have a limited liability company, but he has his relative has a company, and you're in public office, and it's in the public space that Norrie didn't register, that you have an interest indirectly or otherwise, or a beneficial interest in a particular company, then what you're doing basically is not declaring that you have a benefit to gain in some way from another source, from an external source. So let us put it this way. When you declare that you have an interest in a company, let us say it's a garment factory, or let us say it's a cleaning company, or let us say it's a company, a plumbing company that provides some sort of service as it relates to that sort of work. And but when you check the register of companies and you look at the directors turn out to be people associated in the family tree of Mr. Norrie. So in other words, it could be inferred by somebody looking in that Norrie using his public office to ensure that friends and family open up limited liability companies or partnerships or registered bodies in some way, and he's ensuring that these bodies get government contracts where they can make lucrative money, and by his family benefiting, he's benefiting in some way. In other words, there's some sort, there may not be a direct beneficial interest, but an interest all the same. So if you hear a politician that his wife, I'm just throwing that out there, I'm not saying that is actually happening. You hear a politician's wife has a company registered in her name, got a government contract to supply this, that, and the other, and when you check the values, it's millions of dollars. Then the inference that he's using his public office to ensure that his wife benefits, so he's using his public office to ensure his son, who has an interest in a company, benefits. You ought to declare and all your registrable interests as a public official that, you know, my wife have an interest there, my son have an interest there, I have an interest there, I might own a company that got a government contract, or I might have rental income coming in from buildings that I own, and you declare that investment. So the public now would understand what sort of income levels are coming into you, Mr. Norrie, and whatever interest David have where he owns a few companies too and is registered in other family members' names, but his name is not fronting. He needs to declare that in some way. So this is the sort of clarity that comes into the space. Now, the commission, as we indicated, they have a certain amount of power. And in our examples that we put forward there now, and we were dwelling on the Pandey situation, they formed the view that Mr. Pandey breached the law. They heard what he had to say. They made representation to the Director of Public Prosecution's office. An investigation was launched by the Anti-Corruption Investigation Bureau, and the charges were preferred. He went before one Mr. Sherman McNichols, the then Chief Magistrate. And what the narrative in this particular ruling this week, the one Sherman McNichols, well, let me quote it directly. It's Sherman McNichols' name was involved, but it's not a ruling as such that speaks to him, but the narrative is being carried. John Henry Smith and another versus the Attorney General Trinidad and Tobago. It's Privy Council appeal of 2018. The ruling was heard on the 16th of March 2022 and delivered on the 27th of June, which is days ago. Basically, what came into the public space is that they ruled that there was an apparent bias in the decision of the Chief Magistrate when he made certain decisions. They found that there was a relationship between, or it appeared, not that there was in fact a relationship, but it appeared that there may have been too close contact between the then Attorney General and the Chief Magistrate. And because of the appearance of such a relationship, the Chief Magistrate may not have been in the best position to adjudicate on the Pandey issue. In fact, the issue of apparent bias was the legal issue that was raised. So therefore, what the court is, what eventually came out of the situation and the scenario is that as it relates to, and in this particular situation, the Piaco 1 inquiry, that McNichols, he was tainted by his association. And let me just round it off by saying this. What we had was this. We had a Chief Magistrate who had an issue as it arose in relation to property. He had purchased piece of land that he was struggling in terms of completing the payments. And the piece of land was owned by Home Construction Limited. Home Construction Limited is a subsidiary company of Piaco. Now, Piaco, being the big conglomerate that it was, had investments in different areas. So home construction was just one portfolio of its investment drive. What came into the public space is this: the chief magistrate had to adjudicate in the Pandey situation and had to adjudicate in all the Piaco 1, 2, 3, and 4 issues, which is the corruption charges and the fraud charges arising out of the investigation of the Anti-Corruption Bureau. He, in adjudicating now, has found himself in a position where he has to make a decision on Mr. Pandey in terms of committing to stand trial. He has to make a decision on Brian Kwaitong, Rene Pierre, and various members who were part of the UNC government. And it seems, it appears, I'm not saying there was no finding that there actually was, but it appears that his contact with the Attorney General was too snug. It was too close. So much so that when it is he was in this difficulty with regard to the piece of land that cost some $3.8 million and he was having issues in terms of paying it, he was approached while the inquiry was going on, Richard. He was approached by a member of the organization, the subsidiary company Piaco. An individual came to him and he was trying to see if he could have sold the land or how he could have get himself out of this debt. He wanted to sell the piece of land that he had in order to pay off his debts and to reduce his overdraft and to reduce his interest on his mortgage and so on. He was having issues arising out of that sale and that transaction, and somebody came to him, offered him a check for $400,000, which was a deposit on the piece of land that he owned. So the land cost $3.8 million. Somebody offered him $400,000 as a down payment on the land while the inquiry going on. When it is they investigate who the individual is, the individual turned out to be an individual from the home construction, the same company that was affiliated with Piaco. And the irony is that the main witness in the matter involving Pandey is the head of Piaco, Mr. Dupre. So when they looked at the entire thing and they're looking at the facts, they say, but there are too many coincidences here. You have a chief magistrate who's adjudicating on an issue before the court involving corruption and fraud of former political leaders and political members of a political arena, a political party. He's going to adjudicate on them. You have a new government in power, and you, the chief magistrate, seem to have had too much of a close contact with the Attorney General for that PNM government. And suddenly, you commit the Prime Minister, right? In fact, you convict him, you sentence him to 2 years in jail, and right after that, your issue at your land is now being resolved. The Attorney General put in a word and tried to facilitate the sale of your land. That is the allegation. The transaction went through. You received $400,000 from an individual. There was no paperwork to substantiate what the $400,000 was for. So if it is I'm conducting a sale with you and a man come and give me a check for $400,000, there is no paperwork to suggest, well, this $400,000 is a deposit on a piece of land that we're going to buy from you, and therefore take the $400,000. He took the chief magistrate took the $400,000. He deposited. He paid off some of his debts. He paid off some interest. Up to now, no paperwork to substantiate what that money was for him, and no deed, no nothing. And then when it is the chief magistrate realized, now you see this boy, this thing is looking good. He goes back to the bank. He asks back. He said that he's uncomfortable about the deposit he just made. He gets money and he offers to return the money. But by then the horse done bought the stable. He has been contaminated in the eyes of the public in some way. Now let's move past that. That is what happened there. All of this is being ventilated in the judgment this week, in some way. Apart from that, we have a situation where the chief magistrate is saying that the Chief Justice Satnarayan Sharma came to him and tell him, listen, this matter that you are adjudicating upon, you need to understand that in a Hindu household, the women make the financial decisions. You also need to understand that with the witness who's going to give evidence, you need to pay particular attention to what this witness is saying and the evidence that is going to be offered. So the chief magistrate now is feeling that, what is the Chief Justice saying to me, boy? I mean, is he trying to influence me in some way? He makes a complaint. And when he makes the complaint, they initiate what we call is under the Constitution, Section 137, a complaint against the Chief Justice. I don't want to just say something without quoting Richard. If I may just say briefly what that is here, anybody listening in. Under Section 137 of the Constitution, it speaks to what is required for the removal from office of a judge. And 137 subsection 1 talks about a judge may be removed from office only for inability to perform the functions of his office, I'm quoting, or for misbehavior, and shall not be so removed except in accordance with the provisions of this section. So what we did is, what this is speaking to 137 of the Constitution, it speaks to if it is the Chief Justice comes to the Chief Magistrate and is trying to influence a decision he's making, and the Chief Magistrate thinks, listen, I don't like the tone, I don't like the angle you're going. Now he's saying the Chief Magistrate never tell him what decision to make. The Chief Magistrate, the Chief Justice never tell him how to conduct his function. The Chief Justice simply tell him, listen, you need to listen to the witnesses that are going to give evidence in this matter. And you also need to bear in mind that in a Hindu household, the women make the financial decisions. In other words, is he saying, and I'm just saying it, is he saying something without directly saying it? Is he speaking to him in language that is, geared towards causing him to make a decision in a particular way, or is he just old talking? So what the Chief Magistrate did is he made a complaint, and the long shot of it is they began what they call a constitutional, well, it's not a motion. It's the Constitution allows under Section 137 for there to be an inquiry into his actions, meaning the actions of the Chief Justice. So based on what McNichols did, it triggered issues arising out of the Chief Justice and the contact the Chief Justice made with him. Now, what happened is this. When the information came to the DPP's office and an investigation was launched into the actions of Sharma, charges were preferred against that Sharma, and the Chief Magistrate, McNichols, he had an opportunity now. He had to go and give evidence against the Chief Justice in criminal proceedings before the court. And if it is after having offered the evidence, he is found to be a witness of truth, what may definitely arise out of that is they could convict the Chief Justice and he could be sent to jail. There could become legal implications. Lo and behold, McNichols never turned up to court on 2 occasions when the criminal investigation required him to offer evidence before the court. In other words, you made a complaint, you gave a statement, charges were laid against the Chief Justice. He was made answerable to the court. You have an opportunity now when the trial starts to come and offer evidence because your evidence is key to his conviction and you failed to turn up. In fact, he was quoted as saying that he never, when he made the complaint, intended for criminal charges to be laid against the Chief Justice. He intended to let them know that he was approached. He never complained, and say that how he was told to make a decision in such a way. All he's saying is, I was uncomfortable with what was said to me. And he quoted what was said. He never said that the Chief Justice tried to influence his decision. All he said is, things were said to me and I felt uncomfortable, so I'm putting it out there. If they launched an investigation and they found that what he did was, meaning the Chief Justice was trying to influence him, then actions could be taken. That finding was made, and when the time came for McNichols to offer evidence, he said, listen, all I wanted to do was offer evidence in relation to the Section 137 procedure in relation to him to answering to what he said. I am never intended for him to be criminally charged before the court and for him to offer any evidence. McNichols failed to turn up twice. On the third occasion when he came, the DPP's office withdrew the charges against the Chief Justice, and the Chief Justice walked free. And it was found, and allow me to say this, it was found that Mr. Sharma, Sat Sharma, did not in any way do anything criminal. There was no evidence to substantiate that Sat Sharma, our Chief Justice, in any way tried to influence the activity of the Chief Magistrate. He was vindicated and freed. However, the Chief Magistrate McNichols, two charges were, he was being investigated for, in a disciplinary way by the Judicial and Legal Services Commission, and Justice Ventor was given the responsibility to investigate him. Now, he was told, he was informed that you are being investigated because you affected the administration of justice by not offering evidence as the Chief Magistrate, or not offering evidence on the whole on an allegation that you raised against an individual. And twice you were summoned to come before the court and you didn't turn up. And when you did turn up, you refused to offer the evidence. So therefore, they couldn't, in obstructing the administration of justice, that in itself was a breach of your fiduciary duty. So they threatened to lay charges against him, but while the investigation was going on, they didn't lay any charge. They allowed him to continue adjudicating in the Piaco 1 matter. This is where we are today. So the Chief Magistrate, with all that was pending over his head and all that was being in the public space, being investigated by the JLSC, the Judicial and Legal Services Commission, for refusing to offer evidence. They said, you know what, while we're investigating you, we are letting you know that we're investigating you, but we are allowing you still to preside over this matter that you're presiding over, which is the Piaco 1 inquiry and the Piaco 2, 3, and 4 inquiries. And we will make a determination at some point. So what the law lords said, Richard, in this ruling this week, the law lords are saying, Justice Malcolm, he's saying, but the chief magistrate was tainted. He raised an allegation that he was approached by the Chief Justice. He raised an allegation that certain things were said to him. Apart from raising that allegation, he's presiding over a matter in which the main witness in the matter against the then Prime Minister was a CLICO representative who's saying that he gave the Prime Minister scholarship money, and the money deposited in the account is money he caused to be deposited into that account. That depositor and the main witness, Mr. Dupree, he is the big man, the head of CLICO, which is, and the construction company that Mr. McNichols had dealings with relates to a piece of land that he couldn't make payments for, was owned by, that company is a company owned by Mr. Dupree. Mr. Dupree has connection to that subsidiary company. So when we look at the tangled web, Chief Magistrate, in a difficulty as it relates to paying for piece of land, mysteriously receives a check for $400,000 with no paperwork to back up what it was for. It turned out that the money was a deposit on land that was being bought back from him that he couldn't pay for, from the very same company, subsidiary company, that is owned by the main witness in the matter, he has to make a decision that touch and concern somebody, he has to make a decision on. That whole issue there now, the laws are looking at that and saying, but this is really, really a very, very sticky position. He owes, and in the judgment it says, he owes a certain amount of, he's tied. He owes an allegiance to the Attorney General, because the Attorney General, right after he convicts Pandy, approaches, it is alleged that he approaches someone and arrange for a land transaction sale to take place, which would mean when the land is sold, it brings to an end the Chief Magistrate's financial worries about having to pay for a piece of land. He was able to sell it. They said the Attorney General assisted him in that process. So they're saying he's beholden to the Attorney General. He owes his financial subsistence in terms of the man pull him out of a dark corner he was in by arranging for a sale of piece of land. And then apart from arranging for the sale of piece of land that he benefit from, even if it is we don't find something strange about that help. You're so close to the AG that he's willing to get himself involved in arranging for the sale of the piece of the land that you can't pay for. You mysteriously receive $400,000 from a man and a check, and you deposit the check pay off bills, draw down on your overdraft, and you have no paperwork to reflect, well, that was money I deposit on the very same piece of land a man wanted to buy from you. You didn't investigate who's the individual who come and bring the check for you. You didn't investigate the person's history, what they're about. In other words, that's a lot of money to receive and not trace the transaction or have any paperwork to substantiate why it is there. Because remember, you're holding an office. And then worse yet, like I said earlier, it turns out that the person who paid the money is connected to CLICO in some way, and is the head of CLICO offering evidence in the matter that you're adjudicating upon. So when this matter was thrown out, and this is where we are, when this matter, it was treated in the judgment that these people are free to go in relation to Piaco 1 because the adjudicator, in the eyes of the, how do I put it, the man on the street, in the eyes of anybody, the careful observer, anybody looking at that situation from that standpoint, they may be in a position now where they're saying to themselves, but this is odd. The fair-minded observer, Richard, looking in, might say, but how could you have a chief magistrate making decisions of this nature, and he is so heavily involved in tidying in such a way and owing allegiance to sitting members of government? Bear in mind that the PNM were in power. The PNM assumed leadership in 2001. In 2002, this investigation began concerning the airport inquiry. Charges were laid by the Anti-Corruption Bureau and an investigative body that was created within the Attorney General's office. And I stress within the Attorney General's office. So the sitting Attorney General, he had under his portfolio an anti-corruption investigation bureau who were taking guidance and direction, I would imagine, in some way from within the AG's office. I'm not saying from him, from within the AG's office. And when they now investigate and lay charge on a PM and they investigate and lay charge on former ministers, that in itself is shrouded in whether there's a political slant to what is happening, because the very investigative body is operating out of the AG's office, and then charges are preferred. And then on top of that, now you have this very same AG arranging for a sale of piece of land for the chief magistrate who's going to adjudicate in the very matter in which these charges are being laid. And then the main witness is a member, is the head of CLICO who owned the subsidiary company, and it turns out that subsidiary company had approached the chief magistrate with regard to repurchasing the land. And then a check is being made out. So the law lord's looking at any fair-minded observer, and allow me to make this point. I'm reading from the judgment, right? The judgment I'm reading from here is 2008-02265 Pandey and Basil Pandey and Omar Pandey versus is the claimants, and the defendant is her worship as Ejni SPD. Right? The judge is Justice Kokoram, and the point I'm making is this. They're talking about who's a fair-minded observer. It is being said here now that the allegation that a learned magistrate is biased on the grounds that she's associated with the claimant's political enemy resonates in the real world of politics. This quote is a quote not as it relates to Matt Nichols. It's referring to the definition of what a fair-minded observer is. I'm just using the judgment to bring out that point of how the public is perceived. The fair-minded observer is another legal fiction, such as a reasonable man in thought and the well-informed reader in libel. In other words, a fair-minded observer, Richard, is not just any and anybody, a man Lyman in Woodford Square who never went to school a day in his life, who will just hear anything he say and roll with it. A fair-minded observer is people like, I would imagine, you and myself and David, who went to school. We have a certain level of intelligence, a certain level of know-how, a certain level of acumen. We could listen to information, we could grasp what is being said, we could pick sense from nonsense, we could know when it is, though assign no value to what is being said here. The person then provide no empirical data to support what they're saying, they're just making a random statement. So in other words, we know foolishness when we hear it. So the very judge in this thing is defining what a fair-minded observer is, and the purpose of this is this: would a fair-minded observer making observations as to what is happening in political office and what is happening in adjudications before the court, would they feel confident in bestowing trust and confidence that the decision maker will act in a way that is fair-minded, reasonable, and in keeping with the rule of law, the administration of justice, and make a decision without any influence from anybody? And the question here now is, did Mark Nichols, in the eyes of the fair-minded observer, act in a manner that was consistent with his office? How would a fair-minded observer view this individual? And it went on to say, and I'm just doing it briefly, I don't want to confuse the public, but I'm trying to handpick those moments. Lord Phillips, in trying to characterize the well-informed observer, used the analogy of the man in Battery Park. So that's an English analogy of Battery Park. Similarly, I turn to the man on the Brian Lara Promenade. So the judge is saying, let us forget Battery Park. He's bringing it home, contextualize it for a Trinidadian to understand. So the fair-minded observer is the man on the Brian Lara Promenade. And they must ask him whether he considers that there's a real possibility of bias. So the man who's in the Brian Lara Promenade, the man on the street who could pick sense from nonsense, who's not an imbecile, who's not mentally impaired, who's sufficiently, not necessarily educated on a tertiary level, but has he could read and write and make sense out of nonsense. That if that individual could look at a situation and determine whether there's any real possibility of bias. So having said that, where we are is this. It was being said in the judgment that any fair-minded observer looking at this situation as it relates to Piaco inquiry 1, that fair-minded observer would carry that there was some real possibility of bias on Mark Nichols' part when Mark Nichols made certain decisions and committed men to stand trial. In this Piaco inquiry, what happened is this. These individuals, certain charges were laid against them. When there was a no-case submission in the court, meaning that the state laid its evidence, he made a ruling that after the defense addressed him, that he's agreeing that there was no case made out on certain grounds in relation to certain charges, and he dropped those. But he made a decision that as far as he is adjudicating, he is making a decision to commit them to stand trial on charges of corruption and fraud as it relates to other charges. And those other charges were brought before the court after certain other charges were laid. So in other words, under dubious circumstances. And then apart from it being dubious, he has made a finding that they ought to stand trial. What he's saying is the mere fact that he's making a finding that they ought to stand trial, he ought to have recused himself given the position he was in. And recused for the public listening out there means if it is I'm put in a position where I have to make a decision concerning certain individuals, in this case, ex-politicians or current politicians in opposition who are making a decision that relates to their activity while they were in government. And I am in a position where I'm tied in some way, or it appears, not that he was tied, but it appears by the observer on the street, the fair-minded observer, it might appear that he has such a close relationship with the Attorney General. So such a close relationship with sitting members of the executive of the current administration, that they had to help him out when it is in a financial thing, meaning put in a good word to arrange for his property to be sold so he could be solvent. And then on top, just before he did that, just before they got involved and assist, he made a decision to commit certain men to stand trial, who are the political enemies of the incumbent. It means to say that it appears to the fair-minded observer, the man sitting in the Baranara Promenade, the man who have a certain level of intelligence, hey, that this ain't looking right. I mean, it's looking like two hands clap and scratch my back and I scratch yours. You commit these men to stand trial, no problem. As soon as you commit the men to stand trial, I got arrange for you to get a piece of land sell, and at least so you come out of it with your solvent, you get your property sold. I assist you with arranging for that to happen, and you commit these men. So they're so tied in together that it appears to be biased, and that is the crux of it. The matter of Piaco almost thrown out as it relates to that. As it relates to the Pandey matter, And that situation was resolved by 2012. And let me just measure that up in terms of a quick summary of where that went. The chief magistrate found Mr. Pandey guilty. Mr. Pandey appealed the matter before the Court of Appeal, and the Court of Appeal looked at the very same issues that I just raised here about apparent bias and overruled the decision that was made in terms of they revoked the decision of the chief magistrate to summarily convict Mr. Pandey. Mr. Pandey was ordered to a retrial process, and that matter was eventually thrown out, and Mr. Pandey was vindicated. But the same criticism that I was lodged at McNichols in relation to this matter, Piaco one, was lodged by the Court of Appeal in relation to the apparent bias in relation to his adjudication in the Pandey matter, that he was too tainted, or it appeared that he was too tainted, or he was too connected, and too many coincidences, and he ought not to have recused himself, but he didn't. So Mr. Pandey was vindicated. The situation as it relates to these people, they have now been vindicated. Some Pandey would have benefited from that vindication as far back as 2012, if I recall correctly. And then, well, the spin-off would have been Pandey went back to trial. When it is Ejni Espine had to adjudicate in that process, he lodged a complaint that she was also tied to the PNM and the Maurice Marshall Development Foundation. That is a story for another day. What happened is, in passing, is Mr. Pandey took issue with the fact that the new adjudicator had certain linkages to the Maurice Marshall Development Foundation. It turned out that her father was a founding father of the PNM. And he is saying that, and it was raised through his lawyers, that the very blood of the PNM flowed through her. So again, the issue of the fair-minded observer came up, and the court ruled that no, Mr. Espine, there in no way was she in any way influenced or could be deemed to be influenced by her father, because she didn't even grow with him. She had a father who was tied to the PNM back in the 1950s, 1956, 61, 66, all the way to 1976, involved in the PNM. But she grew up with a stepfather, not that man who was her father, who was involved in the PNM. So to say that she had a close relationship with father, it was far from that. She never grew with him. He was biologically a father, but not the father in the house that she grew up in. So the court ruled that she ought to be able to adjudicate, and no fair-minded observer would think that there's a relationship between her and the PNM. And although they had raised that she was serving on the Maurice Marshall Foundation Development Board, mere serving on that doesn't make you PNM, because Father Clyde Harvey, who was a member of that board, say, well, no sitting member of the board could have any political affiliation. From the time you decide to take up political office, associate yourself politically, coming off this board. So she was in no way tied to the board, and evidence reflected same. So Ms. Espine was allowed to make her ruling. What turned out is, by the time the matter came to its natural end, there was a stay of the prosecution against Mr. Pandey, and he too was vindicated. So that died a natural death. Where we are now is Mr. Pandey walked out of it, and today those involved in Piaco 1, they walked out on this particular charge, and 2, 3, and 4, Richard, more likely are not heading in the same direction. So while all these allegations are raised on politicians, and more recently you would have had other things raised on other individuals, somehow when it is the law doesn't run its course, or things aren't followed in the way and manner that it should, what we see happening in the public space is you and I are made to look like idiots. We get so emotionally tied and involved in the narrative, David. We get so involved in the narrative, and we get so emotionally tied to what the politicians are doing and what they're not doing. At the end of the day, the court runs its rule, and justice is served, and all the appeals are utilized, and you go to the Privy Council, and you walk out of it scot-free.
Justice is not served when you had to wait so long to get justice. Justice delayed is justice denied, and I believe in that. And our system allows for too many matters to be delayed for too long. This matter, as it relates to the Piaco, it ain't done yet. It done on that point, as it will in relation to what went to the Privy Council. But it's not done in its entirety. There's still, I think, a Miami-based side of it. The Privy Council has no, how to say, no jurisdiction or cover over what happens there. So, in relation to that side of it, where the the matter was appealed, it was appealed in a particular way. We could conclude that it may be good enough to say it's done from the English side, given that that is our final court of appeal. And the other sections of it that may go, they may flow in a similar way, but not on the Miami side. It's a very different thing. And I have to say, justice in England and in America is very different to justice in Trinidad. Because although our system fairly derived from that of the British system, we don't run it the same way. Matters go to court in England, more often than not, they reach a conclusion a lot faster than they do in Trinidad. And the question for that is, why? Why, Fareed? You could probably tell us that. Why?
Well, you see, the thing is that we have to recognize that we have institutions that were created by the Constitution, and the institutions ought to be made to function in particular ways. Just like we just started discussing the Integrity Commission. And the Integrity Commission has turned out to have a lot of problems. Why is it now we are saying that 7 years of declarations have not been accounted for, and 7 years, 2014 to now, 7 years of declarations, and not just declarations, but declared interests have not been made? Why wasn't this raised in year 1 or year 2? Why it wasn't raised an example set right away? Why are we looking to now retroactively repair 7 years of damage, and now have to establish a moratorium on the persons who may have benefited from the issue? We ought to be dealing with issues when it presents itself. If it is there's a problem in terms of a body acting outside of its remit, then that problem ought to be addressed in the moment. Don't allow it to go septic. Don't allow something as simple as that to evolve into 7 years of impropriety, if we were to use that word. And I'm referring to the Integrity Commission. And 7 years of people acting in a certain way. And now you're looking to do a repair job. That is one of the problems that we have here. The institutions of the state are in decay. They're not functioning. But when the poor man or the man on the street commit an act, the heavy hand of the law and the police coming after him. That is why when Acting Commissioner Jacob talk about he thinks that there are certain repairs that ought to be made to the Anti-Gang Act, and when he talks about the Bail Act that amendment should be made, where there are schedules in the Bail Act that says that when you commit certain offenses, meaning shooting with intent and serious criminal offenses, that you ought to be denied bail for a period of 4 months before the issue of bail is addressed in the minds of the court. He's saying it should extend to tax evaders too, and it should extend to people committing white-collar crime, because there's a huge amount of white-collar crime that is taking place. But we're ready in terms of the emphasis of the law to come down on the man who picking up the gun and firing the firearm. But we're not ready to come down on white-collar criminality in the same way. So McDonald Jacob, when he spoke and talked about, I think the amendment should include white-collar crime. The politicians jump on and said, you concentrate on enforcing the law. Allow the parliament to legislate. To me, that's a defensive kind of action you're taking there. I mean, like you're touching a corn. I am not pro police in any way, but I'm not against the police. I'm saying that there's a certain way to do certain things. And I'm agreeing with you when you're saying that the way the law is executed here, sometimes it causes us to wonder, because the justice system in a more developed country may appear to be more efficient. The thing with it here is, and that is the example that we explored today, when you have people who put in a position to execute their function in a particular way, you ought to execute their function that nobody could question your decision-making process. Nobody could question whether your hand was clean or your hand wasn't clean. I'm not making any judgment on anything. I was merely repeating that is why I try to refer to the judgments that was in front of me and the legislation that is there. These are things that came into the public space and they're a matter for public record. The individuals ought to fulfill their function, and you ought to be held accountable in this country. And I find it very disturbing that public officers, and we are saying public officers, the public officers to the listening public, senators and members of the House of Representatives and people in high office sitting on state boards and statutory boards have not been fulfilling their function, which is to declare their interests, where their interest lies, and to make declarations as to their assets, incomes, and liabilities. Because you out there, you are being held accountable, and the police ain't frightened to come and kick down your door 3 o'clock in the morning and lock you up and put you in a station in a cell, but they wouldn't do it, or they may not do it in ready fashion to other persons. And you have people who, it is in the public space, breaking the law, because that is what they're doing. When it is you don't make these declarations and you don't declare your interests, you're breaking the law. And moratoriums are being granted to them, meaning that, you know, there's a get out of jail card free for them in relation to these breaches. But the same goodwill may not be extended generally to the public. And I'm just saying that in a general way. I'm not being very specific. So I'm not saying that, you know, the Minister of Finance recently came out and said that there were a lot of employers who weren't remitting the national insurance contributions to the NIB board, the National Insurance Board, and they had a moratorium that granted a pardon to those individuals. So in no way am I trying to be biased here. The Minister of Finance did say that the public was given that sort of moratorium. Just like when they're coming after you for taxes, if you haven't filed a tax return from 7 years ago, they give you a moratorium on that. So if this moratorium is being granted here, at least let it be a moratorium that is grounded in law. I haven't been able to find, and I'm open to correction, anything in the Integrity in Public Life Act that allows the Commission to act in such a way to grant some sort of leniency towards public officials and not have them be held accountable for not making the declarations and declaring the registrable interest. That is simply wrong. Well, how do you feel about that in terms of what do you think needs to be done now, Richard, having heard this? Well, you're not in agreement about the moratorium.
Right. But specifically, tell me, no, you had to clarify the question. Specifically.
All right. Do you agree that the action taken not to cause persons who fail to declare beyond the last 6 years, do you think that moratorium ought to be granted? Or they should be made to declare it? Because remember, if they declare it now,
they should be made to declare it. Me even going any further. They should be made to declare it, because that is the purpose of the Integrity Commission, not to watch and to be the watchdog for the people of Trinidad and Tobago. People in public office dealing with public funds. And it's not for the Integrity Commission, due to their own internal shortcomings, should get up until we can all pass. What they should put out is say, hey, we're giving all the X amount of time to come and make your declarations. If not, we would assume certain things and act on it. You follow what I'm saying? And get legal advice and cause people to do it so that they respect the Integrity Commission should have going forward. When people take up public office in the future, one of the things they know they must do, and early, is to do what they have to do in relation to fulfilling what they have to fulfill with the Integrity Commission within the time frame. So you find a lot of newly elected persons and appointed persons going and get their form and looking to, you understand what I'm saying, put everything that they possibly can in place. So to me, what they did here, they encourage people now. They have encouraged people here now to frustrate the process, ignore them, don't take them on. And you see, by doing what they did, they create a precedent for people in the future. You go in office now and you don't want to declare, and they're hustling you down. You still go give me a chance now. You all had people from 2014 to 2022 who didn't do it. How are they hustling me so on a personal or what? They may back off. That give you more time. Next thing they come and say, give Farida and Nori, write off that claim. Let me turn the page and start afresh. You understand? That's what they did to themselves. and what have done is make themselves come across as possessing or having less and less integrity. I disagree with that decision.
Yeah. It's sad. And when we look at the examples I raised in terms of what Mr. Rowley and Mr. Pandey went through, they have so much power. You know, under the Integrity in Public Life Act, the commission itself has the power to order or to ask that a commission of inquiry be conducted, where you could summons persons to account for your actions. So let us say they're conducting a parallel investigation, with their own investigation going on with regard to your integrity or the person's integrity, in that case, Dr. Rowley. And while that is going on, there's a commission of inquiry that they called into existence, that they cause to be conducted, where that commission, they can now summons Richard Norrie, Farid Ali, Barrington Thomas, Ganga Singh, summons them to give evidence in terms of the allegation being raised, and then they make a finding. It turned out that with Rowley's situation, the Commission of Inquiry made a finding that Mr. Rowley was innocent of the allegations, and the Integrity Commission's parallel investigation was still going on. And they forward the information now to the DPP's office and cause the DPP and the police to get involved, and they haven't allowed Mr. Rowley to respond to the allegation yet. So in other words, this is not a registrable interest issue alone, or a declaration of interest issue alone, or people issue in terms of their fulfilling basic functions like dealing with persons' declarations and persons' interests. Even when they have to execute their function as an investigative body, they're assuming a prosecutorial stance. They're raising allegations and persons investigating a man, and even getting the man opportunity to respond, to explain himself, and then forwarding a file to the DPP's office and then the DPP causing the police to start to investigate. And up to now, the individual who is the subject of the investigation, he can get opportunity to respond. So it's a history of problems here. This entire commission or the organizational structure needs to be examined. And the sad thing is, but the persons who are being picked to operate in this capacity, these are people of the highest moral standing. These people that they could stand up to public scrutiny until they get there. So when they get their meeting systems in place that turning that is impacting on their character and the way they execute their function, it's making them do things. So it's causing them to operate in a way. Maybe there's a culture in the commission itself and the way things operate that you become subsumed into the culture. And the culture begins to dictate how you conduct yourself, and that in itself is a problem.
Gentlemen, 7 o'clock.
David needs to get home. Remember, Labrie is not right there, and the weather isn't the best.
And the weather isn't so nice in Port of Spain.
Today, I played the role of listening a lot to the cases and all those things.
Yeah.
It was nice to know some of the history and how they got to where they eventually got to, and what was the thinking behind the judges' minds to take the decisions that they did. Nice explanation, nice research.
Yes.
Thanks. The quality was good. Yeah.
Yes.
Thanks. I tried to bring to the table something new. So
that was very good.
Yeah.
That was very good. Very good. 10 out of 10.
Yeah. I think so. I know Farid home already, and I am as well.
Yeah.
Daddy Mac, get home safely. Thanks again,
Okay,
Farid.
my brother. Yes. And thank you so much, Farid. Yes.
Yeah.
Well done. That's it for today, folks. Join us again tomorrow.